across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Very much appreciate you joining me here in the studio. Lots to talk about today, hoping to actually get a bit more talking done today. An awful lot of that of the show yesterday taken over by Donald Trump, getting standing ovations and talking and, as it turned out later, richly humiliating our Prime Minister as well. We'll talk more about that. But whether you are listening on DAB Plus radio this morning, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you so much for your company. Don't forget, if you do miss a thing or you missed anything from yesterday's show or indeed last week, so you want to go back to this week's, have a look at our YouTube page, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe. Never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we are going to obviously still talk about what is going on in the Middle East and repercussions back at home, because 2 years of torment are over for the families of the last surviving Israeli hostages, as the remaining 20 were released by Hamas. Some extraordinary scenes, extraordinary videos and photographs of that. Donald Trump held yesterday as the historic dawn of a new Middle East. Never one to sort of, avoid the hyperbole when he can, but he met with world leaders and kissed in Egypt to sign his peace plan for Gaza. Now, after being lavish with praise for bringing peace to the Middle East, the US president apparently is turning his attention to ending the war in Ukraine. He's meeting with Zelensky later this week, and he's also talked aloud about possibly giving Ukraine the much desperately wanted long-range Tomahawk missiles if Vladimir Putin continues to refuse to get into peace talks. Meanwhile, back in Britain, this in particular is what I want to hear about from you today. The Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has accused pro-Palestinian activists, some of whom she said continue their protest after Donald Trump's peace deal, of not actually wanting peace in the Middle East. I know, I'm as shocked as you are. But isn't it good that a Labour Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, should be actually recognising something which is pretty obvious to the rest of us? So what do they want? And should they be marching on our streets for this? Well, we believe in freedom of speech, freedom of protest, but where do we draw the line? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Plus, Nigel Farage yesterday took aim at what he called cretins who've been running the economy for too long. I think he's been kind with that word, frankly. He vowed to create a second Thatcherite big bank for the city. The Reform UK leader singled out Gordon Brown for criticism for selling off gold reserves too cheaply and imposing too much red tape. Also, later this morning, Nigel Farage will be in court where the man accused of making death threats against him will be sentenced, and we'll hear from Nigel Farage after that as well. All that coming up. Do get in touch. Love to hear your thoughts on anything we're talking about today, but in particular what the Home Secretary had to say, that actually some of those people marching on the streets claiming to be wanting peace in the Middle East, claiming to be about Palestine, we've actually got a peace deal on the table and they carry on marching. Maybe they don't actually want peace. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What's your reaction? Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. Text us on 87222 or get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls, as you know, all together now, charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. Right now, delighted to welcome to the studio, as regularly on a Tuesday, Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
It is a happy week. I mean, my God, we've gone through some horrible weeks recently, particularly with the savage terror attack on a mosque in Manchester. Horrific marches ever since in our streets. I mean, just the blatant, horrific racism, anti-Semitism that we have seen on our streets in recent weeks is really, really shocking. But we had some hope yesterday, and we saw the release of all 20 remaining living hostages held by Hamas in Gaza back to Israel. I mean, I've got to be honest, I'm clearly addicted to the videos. Having been to Israel, and it is impossible, as I said so many times, to escape the pictures. You recognise the faces, you've seen these faces, you've heard these names, you've read them. They're on every street corner, they are everywhere. There are ribbons everywhere. Every single person in Israel knows someone affected by October the 7th. Every single person in Israel knows someone who has been involved in the war in Gaza, because children, they're 18, 19, 20-year-olds, they are conscripted and they have to serve. So it was a huge day, not just for the families, but it was a huge day for the entire country. And we did see that love for Donald Trump. That was not being faked. That was from opposition and the government, the parties in government as well, alike, for Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday. But now it's the morning after the night before. We didn't get all 28 bodies of those who's murdered by Hamas back. Only 4 have been returned. That is a breach of the peace deal, phase 1 already. But what do you make of where we go next, and any hopes, given that the footage we've seen coming out of Gaza, there's a load of people looking very healthy, saying they've survived genocide and famine, but also Hamas carrying out mass executions of their enemies?
No, it's a reminder that even though phase 1, it seems like, has been secured, even though there are details which are still to be drawn out, that there's still a lot of road to run. And I think that was always going to be the case. I think the great kind of diplomatic coup that was pulled off here was simply to get Hamas to agree to rescind the hostages, to send them home, and without Israel having to completely withdraw from Gaza. You basically had Hamas realise, under significant pressure from the Arab and Gulf states, that they'd run out of road, and that if anything, they're continuing to hold on to the hostages could actually be to their detriment rather than to their negotiating.
Yeah, they didn't do it out of, goodwill.
Exactly. And so it's worth dwelling, though, on what wonderful scenes we did see yesterday. Not only the individual families who were in floods of tears of joy because people that they'd, in their darkest moments probably thought would never actually come back, who had been living in the most inhumane conditions, in the most hellish conditions imaginable, actually returned to them. But the way in which the whole nation welcomed them back is a reminder of, first of all, what began this war to begin with. It was the murder of civilians, it was the sexual assault of civilians, and it was the taking as hostages of civilians. And it was a reminder of that, even though this has been a horrendous time for everyone involved, that I'm sure many people in the IDF will feel like this is worth it. We got them back. Yeah. This is what this war was about to begin with.
No man left behind. I mean, that is a very strong feeling there. I mean, there were 3 things that particularly, I'm going to go with irked. I don't think I can use other words on the radio about a lot of the coverage yesterday and commentary on social media. One is they look pretty well. We had that, didn't we, about previous hostages, particularly female hostages being returned. We saw, some of these hostages. David, he saw him emaciated. We saw him digging his own grave emaciated. Those pictures weren't faked, they were real. These people were starved and tortured and beaten. We know people are being held underground for like 2 years, not seeing daylight for 2 years. And people saying, oh, well, they looked okay. Yeah, they've been feeding them. They knew that the optics of this were going to look bad, and they've been feeding them at risk to their health, actually, to give them too much food after being starved for so long. But then people also making comparisons, and I had this, it was a BBC report I mistakenly listened to yesterday, and I thought I'm thinking, oh, they're talking about these family reunions and how wonderful it is, and these are no longer prisoners, they are fathers and brothers. And I went, hold on a minute, they're talking about the Palestinians being released by Israel. Now, I'm sure that Israeli prisons aren't very pleasant. If there has been torture, I'd absolutely want people being, held to account for that, and absolutely a lot of the claims being made. I mean, we have to take some of them with a pinch of salt. Hamas lie every day. That's what they do. Terrorists, it's what they do. But I mean, but they're talking about wonderful these people back. You look up. There was one report. This man, he served 20 years behind bars, not seeing his family. Well, he's actually only served 6 years because he's been charged and found guilty of 5 different murders in terror attacks. So yeah, that's why he was behind bars. I mean, it's a really good way of not getting put behind bars. Don't commit terror attacks. It works for the rest of us, which I did just find absolutely extraordinary. But also just the equivocation, the whole sort of, the hostage. Often BBC referred to a hostage exchange. Yep. It's not a hostage exchange. Hostages taken, and then prisoners given as a ransom payment. But also just talking about them as if they were the same. Families on both sides. No, these people were held behind bars in prison, even the detainees. When we're at war, we have detainees in our prisons too who are not held after trial and not charged. It's a very unfortunate part of war. It really is. But the idea that these people were held in the same conditions, and then the whole thing, a lot of these men, and again it was men, not women, a lot of very ill-informed people trying to do the right thing, saying, isn't it awful the women didn't survive? No, the women have already been released. Some women died in captivity, but the women have all been released. They were prioritised because of the concern we know is legitimate about rape and other abuse they were getting. But But it's just this equivocation I just found utterly repulsive.
I know, and it's one of those things that we almost could predict it, couldn't you? There's always this temptation when on the part of the mainstream, supposedly mainstream media, to try and create a kind of false equivalence between Israel and Gaza, between Israel and Hamas. If anything, it sometimes cuts it further in the other direction. You would think that it was almost the Israelis who were being unnecessarily extreme in their pursuit of these hostages and so on and so forth. So this we're kind of accustomed to by this point. I think the only thing that you would hope is that there would be some kind of reassessment after you saw the hostages returned, because of the fact that it was abundantly clear the kind of way in which they've been treated. The short memories people tend to have, forgetting those images of emaciated hostages in Hamas's tunnels being forced to humiliate themselves and dig their own graves, that just because they've been fed up for a couple of days to try and make them look slightly more presentable for the international news media, that why are Western trained journalists so gullible in the face of what is such transparent propaganda? I don't know.
Well, that's the thing. Are they gullible, or do they know what they're doing? And that's the thing. Like the protesters on our streets, I mean, it is extraordinary. Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, interestingly, in the Commons, where she's actually been giving a statement about the terror attack on the Heaton Park Mosque. I keep doing that. Apologies, Heaton Park, genuine apologies, Heaton Park Synagogue in Manchester. And she said, protests have continued both before the peace agreement and after the peace agreement in the Middle East. I think we can conclude that not all of those protesting truly wish to see peace in the Middle East, but that is for them to answer to what their motivations really are. We are very clear that while the right to protest is a fundamental freedom in our country, enjoyed by people of all backgrounds and often the cause of grave offence to other people who live within this country, it does have to be balanced against the right for all people to be able to live in safety. Now, we're talking about these un-British pro-Palestinian protests that went ahead 2 days after the Manchester attack. I mean, you and I feel very strongly about freedom of speech and about the right to protest, and I defended for at least a year, you know, the right of these people to protest. I didn't like what they were doing, but you have the right to protest, but you don't have the right to make death threats. No. And that's what we're hearing on our streets. No,
of course, it's one of those things where the right to protest is crucially important, and it's something that we should defend even when it's people that we find despicable exercising that right. But often people are demanding the right to do things which no one recognises as legitimate. And also, I think at the very least, we shouldn't hold back in our condemnation of these people. The willingness to hold demonstrations on the day of the Heaton Park Synagogue attack.
It told us a lot.
Exactly, and what it told us, which is that they know that whilst they present this as just advocacy for Palestine, or in the case of that particular demonstration, this is about Greta and the flotilla. They know that if you go around waving Palestine flags and beating drums about genocide on a day in which Jews have been murdered by someone who had those ideas in his head, who held those people as responsible ultimately.
So I think the police think he may have been, that a man called Jihad may have been
his motives
influenced.
are so unclear that we are just speculating, but nevertheless it's quite clear that a large part of these demonstrations is to taunt and to humiliate Jews. They pretend this is purely about Israel-Palestine.
Exactly.
That's clearly not the case, and I'm sorry, people getting upset when these marches get labelled as hate marches. If you're constantly going on demonstrations in which people are repeating Arabic war slogans about the 7th century murder of Jews has always happened, if you can never have one of these Saturday demonstrations without someone somewhere holding up a swastika. If you look at when these first erupted, there was about 5 groups who were involved in them, and according to a Telegraph expose, 2 of them had quite close links to Hamas, i.e. one of them was co-founded by a former Hamas chief who lives in London for some bizarre reason. I think we're within our rights to call them hate marches.
I think we are. Well, I mean, wonderfully, we have actually been able to identify, with the help from people, the sleuths on social media, this delightful young soul. Let's have a little watch and a listen of this student. This is a student at Oxford University who was at a march in London with his microphone openly calling for death. Well, I'm assuming he includes me and Tom in this. Let's have a watch and a listen.
I don't want to yap for too long, but a chant that we've been workshopping in Oxford that maybe you guys want to join in. It goes, Gaza, Gaza, make us proud, put the Zios in the ground. Gaza, Gaza, make us proud, put the Zios in the ground. Gaza, Gaza, make us proud, put the Zios in the ground.
Zios, code for Jew. It's code for Jew, but it's also, let's be generous and say it's just Zionists. Okay, so Israelis, Jews, who believe in the Israeli state, and people like you and me and many of our audience who accept the right of the Jewish people to have a nation state. He's calling for us to die. That's what put them in the ground means. He's been identified as an undergraduate student at the University of Oxford at Balliol College, one of the very good colleges as well, you know. And his name is Samuel Williams, and apparently he's from Tunbridge Wells.
Of course
studying,
he is.
Of course he's. Of course he's from Tunbridge Wells. Of course he is. From the mean streets of Tunbridge Wells, where he grew up, no doubt, on the similar sort of housing estate as Bob Villan of the Bob Villan fame. I mean, it's genuinely. I mean, you couldn't make it up. But as I've messaged the Metropolitan Police, they have messaged me back. I'd like this person arrested and questioned. I mean, these are death threats. These are clear death threats. This goes far, far beyond what we've heard from, you know, I don't know, let's give an example plucked from the thin air. Lucy Connolly, who wrote a horrible, horrible message, you know, burn the asylum hotels down with them in them, you know, for all I care. It's not the same as go on, do it. He's calling about people being killed and buried. That's what he's calling for. It's a death threat.
And how did we get into a situation where this has just become the stuff of sort of upper middle class, edgy protest?
Edgy.
I use that phrase kind of slightly advisedly because they almost treat this as if it's just kind of provocative and interesting and countercultural.
Cosplay in his little cafe.
And yet this cosplaying involves blood-curdling anti-Semitic calls for murder. How do we get to this point? I mean, like, it's one of those things where obviously we should reserve our eye for the individuals involved and that they deserve all of the brickbats coming their way and all the consequences coming their way. But there's also a kind of question about this younger generation of people who kind of think of themselves as really radical and progressive and interesting.
They're the good people.
The good people, the right side of history, have become so comfortable with barbarism, with anti-Semitism, with they almost get a kind of frisson from it. Like there's almost a kind of arms race going on between them as to who can be the most outrageous in the chants that are being produced. And I think the Bob Villan thing is kind of set.
Oh, I know what he's
doing
to himself when he watches that video back.
Quite.
No, you just know, don't you?
It's sickening. What they're saying is sickening in and of itself, but the fact that this has just become a kind of subculture where they're trying to outdo themselves as far as how much they can.
Yeah, well, they need. I mean, again, freedom of speech doesn't include death threats. Sorry, it really doesn't. I want to hear your thoughts, particularly what the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has said, that some pro-Pal activists want to continue protesting after we've got a peace deal. Now, whether it actually all comes off, and we'll talk about that a lot more in the show. Do not want peace in the Middle East. What's your reaction? 0344 499 1000. Let's just for the laughs, let's also talk about Donald Trump. He spoke for a very long time after criticising other people in the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, for speaking for a long time. My God, it was a long session. 14 standing ovations, I think he got. And then he moved on to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, where he met up with, I mean, it was, goodness knows, dozens and dozens of world leaders, including the likes of the Macrons and the Starmers, who turned up for their little moment in glory, trying to pretend they had any remotely useful role in this process. And then we had this wonderful, wonderful scene where Donald Trump summoned Keir Starmer, whose name he apparently had forgotten at that point, to the front of the stage. Do have a watch to listen. This will never get boring.
United Kingdom. Where's United Kingdom? Where's our friend? Come here. Is everything going good?
Very good.
It's very nice that you're here. These people all came in like 20-minute notice, and I think it's fantastic. And we have so many others, and just so many others. And
It'll just never get tired. It just never get tired watching Keir Starmer. You know, it doesn't mention him by name. Can't remember his name. I mean, it's easy to forget his name. It's fairly memorable. I know they're big mates now, but really. And then summoned to the front of the stage. Keir Starmer's obviously thinking, "Oh God, I'm going to get my moment. I'm going to give a speech." Yeah. And then he's just Donald Trump just carries on. Just carries on, like pointing out that no one else was busy and they just turned up when he clicked his fingers. And then he has to slink to the back of the stage. Giorgia Meloni's face to the whole of this, the Italian Prime Minister, a joy to behold. I mean, here's the thing. Another Prime Minister, or if Keir Starmer wasn't just as bad a Prime Minister as he is, we would be sitting here right now saying, how outrageous that our Prime Minister was humiliated like that. How dare you? But actually, because we know he despises us, because we know he's incompetent, because we know he had no real role in this, we just find it funny too. We actually take joy in our Prime Minister of Great Britain, Northern Ireland, the United Kingdom, being humiliated on stage and made to look like the cuck, frankly. Cuck. I'm allowed to say that he actually is. And it's extraordinary that we are in that place.
It's also extraordinary that he had the kind of guts to think that he was going to be called upon to address the group there at this particular juncture. It's obvious to everyone that at best Britain made itself irrelevant to this peace negotiation because of that absurd virtue signal a few weeks back of recognising a Palestinian state, which is often written up as if it was just a virtue signal. I think it's quite clear, and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State in the US, has made this point explicitly, that if anything, it slowed down the process towards peace, because it was essentially a sop to Hamas and saying that, if you hold out long enough, then you're going to get what you want, which is this diplomatic coup of recognition of a Palestinian state. So to go and pretend as if that you're kind of part of the process, to go on the airwaves, as various ministers have in recent days, to say that we were actually essential behind closed doors to doing this, so essential that no one seems to have noticed what it was that we were doing and at what particular time. I mean, he'd earned his humiliation in that sense. And whilst I know that Trump does, for some quixotic reason that no one can really understand, have some kind of time for Starmer, maybe just because Starmer has kind of kissed up to him to the sufficient degree that he has over the course of the past year or so. He was clearly irritated by the way in which Britain and France and Australia and Canada went about this, at the very least. Yeah.
Well, that said, will we actually see peace in the Middle East? I've got to be honest with you, I'm not hopeful. I think a lot of this falls apart. This is a 20-point plan. Basically, one bit's been agreed, pretty much. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this, everything we're talking about. We're also going to be talking, by the way, about the scapegoating of a senior civil servant over the China spy case, and why more than a dozen countries apparently be willing to back the UK in calling for reforms of the European Convention on Human Rights. But would that ever actually happen? Remember when we tried to reform the EU? Yeah, that went well as well, didn't it? So much more to come. Plenty of top guests as well. More from Tom Slater and more from you. Give us a call to have your say. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:27 is the time. Coming up, we're going to be talking to the former Foreign Minister, Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood, about his chances of peace in the Middle East. Also going to be talking to Reform UK Councillor Russell Quirk about Nigel Farage condemning cretins running the economy. I mean, I think it's been quite generous with that word, don't you? Let's go to the phone calls, though. What you're having your say, 0344 499 1000. Caroline is on the line in London. Caroline, you want to talk about these protests, which Shabana Mahmood, the Labour Home Secretary, said, well, she doesn't think that some of the people who go on protest actually want peace in the Middle East.
Hi, Julie. Yeah, you wouldn't think that, would you? No. If I can, I'd like to make a few points.
Go for it.
Firstly, we all know what these protests are, and they're not protests, they're hate marches. And why they're not banned, well, they have to be banned. But no one is talking about, not the media, journalists, no one is talking about the head of the snake, which is the Muslim Brotherhood. The head office is in London. They are the ones that are part of Hamas. They're the ones involved with the NGOs. They're the ones infiltrating all the universities and God knows what else. And countries across the Middle East, UAE, Bahrain, Saudi, some in Europe have banned the Muslim Brotherhood. No one is talking about that here. Yeah. And unless they're banned, none of this is going to go away, none of it. And I also want to say, what a day yesterday. I was watching TV. I don't think I've cried so much. It was the most incredible day. However, like what you just said, I want to be so wrong. I don't see how there's going to be peace. I watched an interview by the son of Hamas. I'm sure you know his name. I don't know what his name is. Who works for the Israelis. And he really talked about how the West do not understand the mentality of Hamas. And their charter is they will never make a friend with a Jew, and they will never, ever give up to get rid of Israel. That's the fact. So how do you make peace? And then on top of that, no one's talking about Hamas killing, murdering, I think 35 or more.
Well, they are. I mean, even the BBC managed to get it on their website. I think people talking about it online, there was no choice. And these were executions in daylight. They want the people of Gaza and Israel, they want the Middle East to see what they're doing. It's a show of power. And we're going to be seeing Gaza. There may be peace temporarily between Israel and Hamas, but there ain't going to be peace in Gaza. I mean, the people of Gaza may well rue the day when IDF forces withdraw.
No, absolutely. But, our big problem is infiltration here. Yeah. And even when we get a new election, whoever that might be, whatever, how are we going to deal with this? Yeah. I mean, and I don't have any idea. I don't have any ideas. And I also want to say to you, Julie, your speech you made, I don't know where it was, somewhere outside.
I did a speech last Thursday outside Downing Street, but annoyingly Keir Starmer wasn't there, but it was about anti-Semitism and his failure to do anything about it.
Well, it was absolutely amazing, and I really want to thank you. No, it's so amazing with people like you, but it's a very, very, very worrying time. And then you've got to think about all those terrorists that have been released in Israel. Yeah. What, they're going to become nice citizens, really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Yahya Sinwar, who led the October 7th attacks in 2023, had been released a few years earlier from prison in return for a hostage release. I mean, that's what they do. But look, according to the BBC and ITV and everything, it's absolutely wonderful that families in Gaza are welcoming home the men, the brothers, the husbands, the sons that they've missed for so long, and what a tragedy it's been for them, apparently. I mean, you'd never guess most of those men had actually been convicted of serious crimes, would you? Caroline, thank you. I really appreciate your call. Thank you so much. Let's talk to John, who is in Birmingham. John, what hopes do you have after what happened yesterday?
Well, I'm just glad that they've got all the hostages back now, and hopefully it looks like an end to it. But I was just thinking that I think Trump has sold this peace deal on his Riviera Palestine, basically. I think he's got Qatar and Saudi Arabia to buy into rebuilding it into a fantastic place for as a holiday destination where they can all make lots and lots and lots of money. And I think they've all bought into that and think, right, let's make it that beautiful Riviera in the middle.
I mean, who cares what the motivation is? And wouldn't that be wonderful for the people of Gaza? Yeah. There'd be jobs, riches beyond their wildest dreams. What's not to like?
Exactly. Yeah.
Except that isn't the aim of, the radicalised population there and the people in charge. Their aim is the destruction of Israel and killing all Jews. That is the only thing they care about.
And I think Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, I think they're all fed up of it now. Just look, come on, let's just move on.
I think that has been the key point, isn't it? The key thing, that, especially with Qatar, a bit of a wake-up call after those attacks from Israel, and of course attacks, taking out the Hezbollah, taking out the Iranian nuclear threat and things like that. That actually is an element where, yeah, this is getting a little bit too close for comfort, and it's no longer in our interest. It's been a useful little game we've played, but actually we want to have Western money. We want to have, World Cups and things like that. It's not really useful to be having this war going on anymore.
Exactly. Let's make some money rather than misery.
Give us a percentage. What chance do you think that, say, in 5 years' time, there he is, Gaza rebuilt, peace in the Middle East?
I think while Trump's there, it'll be pushed ahead. It depends who takes on after Trump, I think. They're all too frightened of Trump.
Very interesting. John, thank you very much indeed. Appreciate that. Tom Slater is still with me in the studio from Spiked Online. I wish I had more optimism. I think, money talks a lot of these things. I mean, there isn't a single, horrific Arab leader of a murderous, tyrannical state in the Middle East who is motivated by worrying about the Palestinian people and the babies in Gaza. Rubbish. They couldn't care to who. They don't care about their own people, and they don't care about the Palestinian people. They do care about looking after their own interests. If that's what it takes, that's what it takes. But is Donald Trump's presidency, is that enough?
Well, I think it's one of those things where we can be hopeful that something shakes out of this, that maybe we'll be getting back onto the kind of track which we were on during the last Trump administration, which was towards a kind of normalisation between the Arab and Gulf states and Israel, kind of extension of the Abraham Accord, so-called, that Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, was key to negotiating, and which was explicitly derailed, and I think this was one of the motives by Hamas when it launched October the 7th with the backing.
Because the Saudis were about to sign.
Absolutely, and with the backing of Iran, which were very keen not to have this kind of rapprochement take place. So if we're getting back towards something like that, that would be good, but that was still very tentative even then, and it's one of those things where these problems are deep-running and intractable for a reason. The one thing that we can say, and I think you saw this in the willingness of Hamas to come around the negotiating table, and also the pressure that were exerted on them by Qatar and otherwise to do so, is that if nothing else, this war has shown Hamas and others that if you want to wage holy war against the Jewish state, full stop, that will come at a cost for you. And at the very least, that's something which could shake things and turn things in a slightly more positive direction in the region.
Well, we shall see. But again, if you're willing to sacrifice your own people, including your children, and openly talk about that, you're willing to do it again. They've said they were willing to do it on October the 8th, October the 9th, 10th. They'd do it October the 1000th, they said. Hamas leadership, they've been very open about it. They say the quiet bit out loud. Love to hear your thoughts, particularly on the marches back here, your hopes for peace, everything you want to say. We'll talk to a top guest up next, Tobias Ellwood, former Defence and Foreign Office Minister. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:38 is the time. Let's talk to my next guest now. Tobias Ellwood is a former Conservative MP, former Defence and Foreign Office Minister, and joins us now. Good morning to you, Tobias.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. Well, just first of all, your reaction to yesterday and your hopes for what happened yesterday, release of the hostages, that exchange with prisoners held in Israeli jails, that ceasefire in place for Middle Eastern peace.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how many times you and I have discussed the Middle East over a few years, and it's been grim. It's been really a bleak outlook. What happened yesterday was truly historic. It was a big day in every sense of the imagination, to see the bombing stop, the hostages finally be returned, the aid move in, and the sense of cautious hope that we're going to see Hamas potentially disarm, possibly leave the Gaza Strip. We're going to see a security operation in place that will satisfy both Israel and the Palestinian people. And we're going to see the Arabic communities start to invest in long-term stability of the region. But the events that are then unfolded in Egypt, 35 heads of state called upon by Donald Trump, and let's give credit where it's due. This is Donald Trump's making. My concern is the absence of detail. I was hoping they were going to sit down in private session to place some of the granular ideas down and expand on this 1.5-page document. I recall that I served in Bosnia in the armed forces. The Dayton Accord was 150 pages long. The detail that was in there, and there's an absence of anything here at all. And the worry is that we've sort of marked out the destination, but we've not said how we're going to get there.
Indeed.
We have a 3-month opportunity for peace, the best opportunity in decades. I fear that we're going to not take advantage of that. That we're not going to see the energy and dynamism that we've seen over the last couple of days as people then depart, go back, grateful that we are where we are today, but not realizing that the hard work starts now.
And that is the thing. It's quite interesting, Donald Trump doing his victory lap around the Middle East yesterday in Israel and in Egypt with, yes, the hostage release is amazing, and the ceasefire, but what happens next? And this is the thing. There is an element where a lack of detail can help. We know with, the Good Friday Agreement, Tony Blair's in one room saying one thing to one side, another room saying another thing to the other side, and you fudge things a little bit because fudging is how it works. This isn't so much a fudge as just, a complete sort of chaos of the fact reality is you've got one side in this, Hamas and others on that side who don't want peace. They have never expressed an urge for peace. They do not accept the thing touted around in the West constantly about this 2-state solution. They don't accept that Israel has a right to exist, and their main aim in life is for Israel not to exist. So how do you square that circle? And whether it's 1.5 pages in the document or whether it's 1,500 pages, if one side doesn't actually accept the other side's right to even exist, how do you get to a peace?
Well, this is where the pressure comes on. And for the points that you've made very, very clearly indeed, Hamas lost any right or credibility to exist as a form of governance in Gaza. And that became evident to Qatar, to Egypt, to Turkey, to the GCC nations, to the entire community. And eventually the pressure was placed on them that they realized that the time was up. And so they then agreed to lay down their weapons. They agreed to have exit, to move into exile, should they wish to choose that. The concern is that we now see them back in uniform. We see them not wishing to hand over power. And on the flip side, we have to say, just to balance this out, what will Israel do now that those hostages have been released? Will they be committed to their side of the bargain as well? And this is where Donald Trump must come in, because he's the one that can influence the Abrahamic Accord signatories. He's the one that can influence Israel, and particularly this prime minister, And I fear, because he loves the deal, he's got his deal, and he very much enjoyed his time in the limelight yesterday with all those leaders, courting him in that way. It was something out of a medieval court, wasn't it? With all those dignitaries turning up. But and I watched it very, very carefully in detail, wanting to advance. But in the 20-point plan, nothing about the West Bank, nothing about what happens to Jerusalem, and nothing about who itself is going to actually run Gaza in the longer term. So the pressure must continue. We must work with our allies, particularly countries such as the Gulf nations, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, because they can place pressure on Hamas to say your time is up. The Palestinians do not want to be run by you. And if you continue down this road, I'm afraid it'll just lead back to where we were a few months ago, and that's back to total war.
Well, indeed. And again, it's fascinating, as Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, saying that, some of the people who are marching, particularly since we've had the ceasefire, had the peace, she says it looks like, they don't actually want peace in the Middle East. And now saying it's for, it's free Palestine, it's this two-state solution and all this. But again, ignoring the fact that actually Palestinian Authority and Hamas, Fatah, made it very clear they don't want a two-state solution. By the way, they've turned down a two-state solution on 4 different occasions, even when they've been offered pretty much every single thing they've asked for. How we move further on from that? I mean, how big a role do you think Keir Starmer will play? Because, frankly, we've just been laughing at the risible claims being made on behalf of his government that we played in any way a vital role in these peace negotiations. And, of course, Donald Trump's frankly humiliating Keir Starmer on the stage in Sharm el-Sheikh yesterday. We've all had a jolly good laugh about it, but it's a bit embarrassing that we really are totally irrelevant to this, isn't it?
Well, two things there. Just to comment on the demonstrations that we've seen in London. Every time I see a Palestinian flag or somebody waving a Palestinian flag, I want to go up to them and say, why don't you have a sticker on there that has Hamas with a big cross on it, showing that you're actually supportive of the Palestinian cause, two-state solution? That's very honourable indeed. But you're actually standing up to say Hamas should have no part of it. And that, I'm afraid, is the issue that I have with any of those Palestinians that are demonstrating. Likewise, on the Israeli side, I've had concerns. I think I've had this conversation with you, with the utility of superior military might by Israel, which I think could have been conducted another way. We are where we are, and you're right to then say, what role does Britain play? You know your history. We're very much involved in this, all going back to the Balfour Declaration itself. I very much hope that we are committed, because this is what we do. We're a member of the P5 of the UN Security Council. This is what Britain has done in our past. We step forward with other nations as a force for good. I know that there's been various debates about what we have or haven't done in the past. I think actually that's helpful. It takes us away from what our focus should be, which is the fact that we are on the precipice of something quite incredible, but it could so easily slip through our hands unless everybody is absolutely committed over the next 3 months.
Yeah, but again, with Israel, the number one thing was to get those 20 live hostages back. We still have another 24 bodies of dead hostages. But I think as much as that's important to those families to get their bodies back, to give them a decent burial, that's not going to be as big a priority for the rest of the world as getting those live hostages back, of course. But we've seen those amazing scenes of reunions with their families. But once that's over, again, will the West be condemning Israel if they say, well, we're going to have to go back in if we see that Hamas are reforming, rebooting, the Hamas tunnels are still intact, and this is an armed force that is openly posing a threat to us, and we can't leave them there. There is no other country in the world that would be expected to have an enemy combatant state next to them who had not been destroyed. I mean, and we'll just go, and the rest of the world would say, well, you have to put up with it.
Yeah, you're 100% right. But it's not just putting up with it. It's having a plan, a strategy that offers the Palestinian people something else. And this is where the support of the Abrahamic signatories then come in, to then zone off Gaza, the Gaza Strip, into areas, start to rebuild where Hamas has zero responsibility. Indeed, anybody connected with Hamas is then put into prison. That would then be a plan, a process to move forward. That's the detail that is currently absent from the 20-point plan that Donald Trump has proposed.
Just finally, very briefly, I speak cross to say very briefly, we have this ongoing story about the China spy trial. I won't go into all the ins and outs, but basically yesterday, Government Minister Dan Jarvis was put up to basically say, well, to throw a senior civil servant under the bus, Matthew Collins, Deputy National Security Advisor. Apparently, he's the one who was tasked with giving evidence to the CPS for an alleged spying activity, and the fact that they're in this spy trial claiming that two men had spied for China, evidence that China was a threat to this country. Basically, it's all his fault, not Jonathan Powell, the political appointee from Keir Starmer. Do you believe that's what's happened?
Well, I know Dan Jarvis well, and I think he was very awkward and felt uncomfortable with what he then had to do.
Didn't have to do it.
It goes down to the fact that we're in absence of a clear strategy that China is a threat to Britain. And until we clarify that, then we're going to get into mess-ups like this. This all focused on, as you know, the fact that our Official Secrets Act was based on 1911 wording, needed to be updated, and it applied to these two cases of alleged spying in Parliament, just around the corner from me. The Conservatives then updated that with the National Security Act, but it couldn't be used retrospectively. So it is a bit of a mess. I hope that we can now clarify where we sit with China, because if we make it clear that China is now an existential threat to global order and indeed to Britain, then we can actually resume these charges against these two individuals.
OK. Thank you very much for joining us, Tobias Ellwood, former Defence and Foreign Office Minister. 10:49 is the time. We'll take a quick break. Up next, going to be talking about why Nigel Farage has condemned the cretins running our economy. That's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:52 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk about Nigel Farage. Well, he's going to be in the news a little bit later on because he's at the sentencing of a man who's been convicted of making death threats to him, an Afghan migrant making death threats to him. Pop, 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 miming using a gun. And we'll be hearing from Nigel Farage after that sentence is handed down. But he's also in the news for talking about the economy. No, it's not just about immigrants, it's about the economy too. And he's condemned the cretins he says have been running the economy. Well, let's talk about this with our friend from the station here, Russell Quirk, who's now a Reform UK councillor. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. So, who are the cretins and why does Nigel Farage condemn them?
Well, the cretins are clearly the Labour government, the front bench, Rachel Reeves. I mean, she's kind of queen cretin, isn't she, really, insofar as her managing or otherwise, big inverted commas, of the economy. But also you have to say the Conservatives, Julia, don't you, insofar as their previous 3 or 4 years tenure in particular, kind of post-COVID, you know, what we saw from the Conservatives and then the baton was handed to Labour was very much excessive borrowing. I mean, we're now borrowing £150 billion a year at a cost in interest terms that is absolutely astronomical. We have inflation right now that was very, very high under the Conservatives, then came down a little bit, but has now gone up again. It's now twice the rate of the Bank of England target. But most worrying, really, is the lack of GDP growth. So the Labour government are trumpeting how well they're doing because we are a nation that actually has positive GDP compared to, fun enough, France and Germany, who are in the doldrums. But the reality is GDP growth in Q2 2025 was half that in the UK of Q1. But the biggest problem is unemployment. Under the Labour government so far, we have lost as a country over 250,000 jobs.
I mean, and unemployment was up this morning by a small amount, but up to 4.8%. Job vacancies down. Average wage growth is still just below 4.7%. And payroll employment flatlining. I mean, none of it's good, given that steely focus on growth that we've heard so much about from Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer ahead of last year's election.
Yeah, well, what we're seeing, unfortunately, I mean, you know, without a wry smile here, is growth in the wrong things. You know, growth in unemployment and growth in borrowing and growth in inflation are not really the look that we are seeking, so to speak. You know, look, we have a huge issue here in terms of, A, the ideology of the Labour front bench in terms of their sixth form-like politics, frankly, where they want to dish out money left, right and centre on
tax the wealthy.
Yeah, crazy things like net zero, giving other countries money for climate change. I mean, that's lunacy. And of course, public sector pay increases. You know, whatever happened to those doctors, by the way? Have they been quietly given that 23%? I suspect Wes Streeting is busy doing an under-table deal with them as we speak. So all of this excessive spend and at the same time scaring wealth creators and entrepreneurs and business people out of the country. You know, that Henley report that we've seen, which states that as many as 16,000 millionaires will be leaving Britain this year. And I know that the left think that's a brilliant thing. You know, what a result that we're getting rid of all these horrible people in their Lamborghinis. Well, I've got news for you, left. And that is, I'm afraid, these are the people that employ about 16 million people in this country. These are the people that pay fortunes in personal and corporation tax, which you need to fuel your public
and is now going elsewhere. Well, Nigel Farage says that he's going to create a second Thatcherite Big Bang. Now, all very well. How is he going to do it? Bearing in mind an awful lot of the pledges, it wasn't a formal manifesto last time round, we know, and he's made various announcements. You know, he wants to sort of end the 2-child cap of benefits. I mean, insane policy. I've had a go at him personally on that. But I mean, actually, Nigel Farage and Reform have talked a lot about quite a lot of money going here, going there, big spending on a lot of things. I know they're going to save a fortune if they got into power on abandoning net zero. That is a massive hit to our economy by keeping that. But are the numbers going to add up?
Well, we're awaiting a big speech in the next couple of weeks from Nigel insofar as what that is going to be in terms of the plans that he's going to lay out as policy by way of reform policy going forward. So obviously I wouldn't dare to try and preempt that. And unfortunately, I'm not a consultee, Julia, as may not be surprised.
Well, we know we're going to hear from Nigel Farage a little bit later after Fayez Khan, an Afghan migrant found guilty of threatening to kill the Reform leader, is being sentenced this morning at Southwark Crown Court. And basically, he was charged with making a threat to kill Nigel Farage when he was in a TikTok video saying he was going to shoot the Reform UK leader when he reached Britain in a small boat, followed it up with another message as well. I mean, very, very terrifying times. Your party leader has faced numerous death threats. He has to have 24-hour security. And an awful lot of people in the mainstream and the left just seem to be remarkably unbothered by this.
Well, and also, Julia, as you, I'm sure, know, in the last 24 hours, a Reform Council leader, 19-year-old, attacked in the street because it would seem, because of the link there between that attack potentially and what that attacker said and what Keir Starmer has said in speeches in recent days, kind of promoting on Keir Starmer's part, division and a bit of hatred. Just quickly, though, let's talk about Faraz Khan. Do we not think that the appropriate sentence, as we will find out later on, would be exactly 31 months in prison? On the basis that that's what Lucy Connolly got for saying.
Well, she wasn't actually
lesser seriously.
Well, she absolutely wasn't calling for that she was saying she was going to kill people. And also, interestingly, we've got Reform UK Council also in the news. This is Claire Mackey-Brown in Scotland, reported Police Scotland for saying she was born and bred here. And the case has been dropped. Like, what case and why did anything need to be dropped? Saying you're born and bred somewhere. How is that racist?
Yeah, so I'm born and bred in Essex, so am I now going to be arrested for it not being outside of the British Isles? I mean, it's something I'm extremely proud of, I have to say. These non-crime hate incidents, which by definition are not crimes, the police have absolutely no business getting involved in this stuff. Do you know Essex Police arrested 600 people in the last 12 months for non-crime hate incidents? Absolutely outrageous.
It really, really is. But meanwhile, we've got some Oxford student who's talking about putting people in the ground and urging people to kill people who are Zionists, Israelis, Jews, and people like me and others who support the State of Israel is right to exist, and no police action yet at all. But there we are. Russell Quirk, great to talk to you. Thank you very much. I'm going to get Tom Slater's thoughts on all of those stories and plenty more besides in the next half. I want to hear from you as well, particularly about those protests on the streets, supposedly pro-Palestinian. But are they about peace? Well, even the Home Secretary is questioning that. Now, give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So much to talk about today. If you do miss anything on the show, you can go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe. You never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, I'm going to be talking more about the release of those hostages yesterday and, of course, where we go with the Gaza peace plan. Do we go anywhere with it? What hopes do we actually have? As Trump yesterday held it as the historic dawn of a new Middle East as he met with world leaders in Egypt to sign his peace plan. But with all the praise being heaped on him and all the praise being heaped in the other direction, are we actually going to see anything? Plus, what's interesting, of course, right now is Donald Trump is turning his attention to ending the war in Ukraine, providing Ukraine with those crucial long-range Tomahawk missiles they've been asking for. That's possibly on the cards. Plus, the National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell's deputy, a civil servant, has now been blamed for the collapse of that China spy case. We'll talk about that. And football pundit Alan Shearer and actor Sir Michael Caine have urged Sir Keir Starmer to ban the smacking of children, already banned in England or Wales. And the pair are among dozens of stars who signed an NSPCC-backed letter being delivered to Downing Street today, calling for parents to no longer be able to claim reasonable punishment under the Children Act 2004. Oh, love to hear your thoughts on that and indeed on all the topics we're talking about. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Get in touch with us on A722 on text. You can message us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. In particular, I do want to hear about your thoughts on the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. She says, in a statement to the House of Commons yesterday about the attack on the Manchester synagogue a couple of weeks ago, she says that some pro-Palestinian activists who continue protesting after that and after Donald Trump's peace deal do not want peace in the Middle East. I know, we're all shocked. Apparently they've actually woken up to that. Should those marches be banned? Is that the answer? Should we just start arresting the people who do actually commit blatant, open crimes on our streets? What is going on? I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Tom Slater, I'm delighted today, still joins us in the studio. He's editor of Spiked Online. Good morning once again to you. We did touch on, these, obviously a lot of these issues already in the last hour, but we've got these hostages home. We've had the identity of two of the bodies of the four that were returned, formal identification. Bipin Joshi and Guy Ilios both returned to Israel. I actually met the father of one of those boys, Guy, when I was in Israel, and I have to say, Guy, I'm obviously assume foreign pronunciation, but Guy. One of the most harrowing afternoons of my life at Hostages Square, meeting with the father. He played us the tape that was recorded on an emergency channel of his son's final call to him. We saw the video filmed by Hamas, which, because they put these things out on social media of his son's car that he was driving and his fellow passengers trying to leave the Nova Festival, being shot at, bullet wounds, and you could see the footage of his friends who were dead, and then you could see him running behind trees, climbed up a tree to try and survive, got wounded, taken captive, wounded and died of his wounds, murdered by Hamas, but just having no idea whether his son was alive or dead, no idea where he was for months on end. I mean, just absolutely harrowing. And to see this man, who was a former IDF officer himself, very big, strong, alpha, he was an alpha man, and to see him breaking down about his son was absolutely harrowing. And he at least will have the tiny chink of comfort of being able to give his son's body a decent burial. But there's a real story to tell behind every single one of these names and faces that we see.
No, absolutely, and it's one of those things which is really felt not just by the families first and foremost, but you really see in the images coming out of Israel how this is a sense of an entire family, an entire nation that's been left bereft by October the 7th, the hostages being taken, it being really keenly felt across the country that as long as any of them, alive or dead, were still in those tunnels, that were still being kept by Hamas, that were still being used as bargaining chips in the horrific designs of this Islamist terrorist group, that was a sort of stain that needed to be cleaned up. And so that's one thing which, aside from everything else that's happened, aside from all the everything that's changed over the course of the past couple of years, that clear sense that this war was a just war because it was about bringing those people home, I think has been underlined by the past 24 hours.
Oh, absolutely. But what did you make of the sort of treating with equal validity.
Yeah.
Oh, and then all these Palestinian prisoners returning home, even though some of them, these are terrorists, these are murderers, these are rapists. They, they've been convicted in courts. Yes, there are detainees as well. There are hundreds of detainees. Yeah, it's been a war. Yeah, you detain people and their children. No, we're talking about 17-year-olds who've thrown stones and deliberately to provoke IDF officers. I mean, give me a break. I'm sure there are some innocent people among those, as there are innocent people in some of our prisons. And people who've been detained. Of course there are. Justice systems aren't perfect in any country, and certainly not during a war zone. But the way these been treated is sort of equivalent. Yeah. Morally equivalent. The hostage exchange the BBC referred to. No, there are hostages. And then there were prisoners. There's very, very different. And also people say, well, some of these men who've been released, well, they were actually IDF soldiers. And some of them were on duty and some of them were off duty. They were at the Nova Festival, they were with their girlfriends. But whether they were on duty or whether they weren't on duty, they weren't treated as prisoners of war by Hamas, who don't wear anything. There are rules for prisoners of war. They were not followed. They were hostages.
And also, if you think about the prisoners who have been exchanged for entirely innocent hostages, as you say, what was it, north of 150 of them are serving life sentences. They're not serving life sentences because they threw some stones at the police. I mean, they're serving life sentences because they've been involved in murder, terrorism, attacks and so forth. And the fact that even now you're seeing mainstream media outlets basically engage in this false equivalence to talk about it as a hostage exchange, that's not what was going on here. There were hostages in Gaza, there were prisoners, many of them pretty hardened, in Israel. And what an insult it is to the families of the people who are working those hostages back to see them kind of put on a same kind of moral plane as people who engage in genuine acts of terror.
But that's where we are, isn't it? And again, we've seen, the defence of these, they are hate marches that we see on the streets. What do you make of Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, being really open in the House of Commons yesterday? But she's been on some of these marches, which is what I find difficult, but she says some of the pro-Palestinian activists who continue protesting after Donald Trump's peace deal do not want peace in the Middle East. That's quite a statement to hear from a Labour Home Secretary.
It is, and whilst maybe it'd be damning it with faint praise slightly to say that, at least at this juncture, someone in the Labour Party is willing to admit that these regular demonstrations, which would always devolve into the chanting of anti-Semitic slogans, which would always devolve into some kind of tussle between protesters and counter-protesters, which would go on each weekend in London or Manchester and Birmingham, and you just knew there was going to be a flurry of things on social media with people holding up placards with swastikas on them or chanting old Arabic war slogans about murdering Jews in the 7th century. The fact that you could set your watch by all of this, the fact that now, all these years later, a Labour figure has had the minerals to denounce this. We could welcome it to some degree, but you're also wondering where were you as these things were going on week after week after week, and had obviously become, we can get into the kind of question about, where is the line where the right to protest exists, but regardless of all that, had obviously become a means of just taunting British Jews about making them feel
Let's call it
unsafe.
what it is.
So let's, thank you, Shabana Mahmood, but this would have been great 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely, indeed. One of the people who've been identified, which is very useful because the Metropolitan Police can now investigate. I mean, I think they should have been able to. If people, online sleuths can define these people on X, I'm pretty sure that the Metropolitan Police have no excuses not to. That said, they're still trying to find the man who's alleged to have stolen my bag. 1st of June 2024, he hasn't turned up to court the last couple of times, so they just go, we don't know where he is. Really? Well, I'm guessing he's busy stealing other people's bags. I think this is what he... allegedly. I think this is what he does for a living, mate. But there we are. Well done, police, if you can't even do that. We've had a guy going on, again, very proud to be videoed with a microphone. They're not just tweeting it and messaging it, trying to be anonymous, blatantly calling openly for Israelis, Jews, people who support an Israeli state, not everything the government does, but the existence of Israeli state, Zios as he calls them, it's code for Jews, shouting in the street for them to be killed. And here's have a watch and a listen of this delightful student from Oxford.
I don't want to yap for too long, but a chant that we've been workshopping in Oxford that maybe you guys want to join in. It goes, Gaza, Gaza, make us proud, put the Zios in the ground. Gaza, Gaza, make us proud, put the Zios in the ground. Gaza, Gaza, make us proud, put the Zios in the ground.
I mean, he's done his little cosplay with his tea towel on, his Hamas cafe. But what I love is he's a student at Oxford. He's been identified as one Samuel Williams of the mean streets of Royal Tunbridge Wells. And he's a student, currently undergraduate student at the University of Oxford at Balliol College. That's one of the good ones. I mean, this is one of the top colleges, one of the top universities in the world. And they had to workshop I mean, that's a rhyme a 4-year-old could come up with if they were a Jew-hating hate monger. I mean, but these people, they're on the streets. Yeah. They're doing it openly. The police stand by and do nothing. Well, you couldn't hear that. You couldn't hear that. And he had a microphone.
But also the fact that there are so many people like him. If this was just one individual, it's something that you could kind of brush off as some hate monger. But you know, we've been engaged in a kind of moral panic about racism in this country for many years, where a lot of aspersions have been cast, particularly at the white working class. The idea that with Brexit and all the rest of it, they just want to kick out all the foreigners. They're racist, even if they won't like to admit it. Something is going very wrong with the upper middle classes in this country at places like Oxford University. People born and raised on the mean streets of Royal Tunbridge Wells have somehow managed to develop not only a deep-seated bigotry towards British Jews, but a kind of frisson, a kind of vicarious thrill through cozying up to barbarians and Islamists. And these are not isolated cases. You see it on these demonstrations all the time. People like that standing shoulder to shoulder with just straightforward Islamist activists. How we came to this position, I have absolutely no idea. But it goes well beyond that.
Well, it ties in, does it not, with a Reform UK councillor. This is Claire Mackey-Brown, who's a reporter to Police Scotland. She's a councillor from Falkirk. And she's talking about it. She's been, for using the phrase, born and bred here. During an interview on the Scottish television, she said there's true unrest. She's talking about these migrant hotel protests. She goes, there is a true unrest, and it is scary. It's scary as a local resident, somebody who was born and bred here. I mean, what's wrong with saying I'm born and bred somewhere? I think it's utterly bizarre. In what way? I mean, in what way is that a racist thing to say? She was reported by somebody who's obviously a lunatic anyway. Yeah. And then the police don't go, what's wrong with that phrase? No. Why is it that they don't investigate every mobile phone being stolen, or every bike being stolen, or every handbag being stolen properly, but for some reason they seem to, or indeed people chanting for people to be killed on the streets of this country, openly and blatantly on microphone, on camera. But they think that they do have the time to, not even, I mean, OK, they say there is no crime, they've dropped the case. No, look, they found no evidence of criminality. But you didn't even need, someone said, what was the report? She said she was born and bred here. That's not a crime. Go away. If you come back again with another nonsense thing, we'll arrest you for wasting police time. That is the only acceptable response to someone making that sort of complaint.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's fascinating if you watch the whole clip in which she makes this statement, which she's speaking, I believe, to STV. Yeah. And in the moment, it's really telling that, first of all, she says, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Yeah. Which is bizarre. It tells you the kind of...
I'm born and bred in this country, arrest me.
Like the way people have kind of internalised this kind of hypersensitivity is quite interesting. Then the journalist says, well, do you not understand how people have concerns about reform when you say things like you're born and bred here? She was born and bred there. She was just speaking the truth. The fact that, again,
were you born there? Yes, fact. Were you bred there? As in, were you raised... By the way, the amount of times when there's a homegrown terrorist and we're told, oh, they're not immigrants, they were born and bred here. That's acceptable.
Yeah. Does that exclude all the other terrorists who might have been, tried to come to this country and do it on the basis of their own get up and go? It's an absurd conversation. I don't understand how it ever got to this point. And you're absolutely right. The police should have been the point where this ended. Like, no, go away. Come on.
Not just no, go away, but don't come back again, or you will face arrest, because you are wasting police time.
And it's obviously politically motivated. Did that STV journalist, or did whoever took this dossier to Police Scotland, really feel mortally offended and thought this was some kind of like watered down fascistic speech, or were they doing it because they were trying to use it as a political weapon? That's what it was. Which is kind of fascistic.
Yeah, when you think about it. It's the sort of thing fascists would do, isn't it? Exactly. It is extraordinary, isn't it? Let's talk about where we are. I mean, just gratuitously, I think, have we got a chance in this next... Yes, we absolutely do have time to mock our Prime Minister in the next half hour with him being basically embarrassed on stage with Donald Trump. But let's move on and talk about, I think, embarrassment that is going to be heaped on this government when all the truth emerges involving this China spy case. Because it's quite a complicated case. And there are some cases you think, oh, Partygate was really easy. Did you have a party while everyone else was locked down? Yeah, I mean, there are some things which are much more straightforward, aren't there? But basically, we've got this China spy case claim. We've got the Director of Public Prosecutions telling MPs we had to drop the case against 2 men who've been alleged to have spied for China because the government refused to give us evidence that China was an enemy state. Keir Starmer's made his excuse basically a couple of weeks ago, going, well, you know, under the law at the time, and it's the Tories' fault, they didn't change the law. You had to be an enemy state, not just another state, and China wasn't designated an enemy state at the time of these alleged crimes. We've then had a former Director of Public Prosecutions, former head of MI6, former Security Minister Tom Tugendhat and others go, yes, it was. Public statements by the government at the time, making it very clear. MI6, former boss Richard Dillon, he was on Ian Collins' show yesterday, I'd have given evidence and made it clear that that was the case. Claims that it all came down to political interference by Jonathan Powell, the Prime Minister's chief, national security chief. And now yesterday, Tories were demanding that the government answers questions in the Commons. And Dan Jarvis, the government minister, put up basically saying, oh, well, actually, it all comes down to this senior civil servant, the number 2 to National Security Advisor. This is Matthew Collins, the deputy to him, and he was given free, rein. It was his free rein to give evidence about these, for this trial, and he knows what he's doing, and that's what happened. It just doesn't wash, does it?
No, of course it doesn't. It stinks to high heaven, and it's one of those examples where the more they keep digging, the deeper the hole becomes, obviously. I mean, the fact that you've had the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Services, previously led by Keir Starmer, let's not forget, openly accusing the government of essentially collapsing this trial by not coming forth with this evidence to describe China as a national security threat. The fact that you've got Jonathan Powell, the National Security Advisor, who is not only being hauled over the coals for this, but also questions being asked about his pre-existing links to China and various organisations.
And he, like Mandelson, who he was, again, many people were instrumental in getting him, Mandelson appointed as our ambassador to the US, very close links with China, inappropriately so. And
even if this is just a kind of bad smell at this point, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. And then you had reports in the Sunday Times over the weekend where you had record cabinet ministers openly saying that we have to go softly on China, otherwise we're not going to get the investment. There is so much here that could easily bring down the government. I think the only reason that it hasn't yet is because there is still a lot more that we need to find out. It's also the fact that, as you say, cases like this, because you can't explain them in a sentence, sometimes they take a while to cut through. But I dare say it's going to be that old cliche about the cover-up getting you rather than the crime. The more that it's been, if it becomes proven or more evidence is put forward that the government have said one thing and done another, it's going to become a much bigger problem.
And Keir Starmer's only spoken about this because Parliament's been in recess. He's only spoken about this in interviews, which is very different from saying stuff on the floor of the House. And he's going to come up with some wonderful little line. I mean, it was interesting, even, was it Bridget Phillipson at the weekend, the Education Secretary, putting out the Downing Street line. Was Jonathan Powell involved in this? This decision-making, as in, was it a political decision and a quiet nod and a wink? Oi, we need to make sure that this is not this trial doesn't go ahead because we want to keep the Chinese happy, and we'll give you your embassy as well, etc., etc. And she said that he played no role in the substance. Now that's a subjective view, isn't it? What we're going to have tomorrow, of course, is Prime Minister's question, and there is a brief moment when Keir Starmer will be in the country. Thanks for bothering, Prime Minister. And as the caller made the point yesterday, we may as well hand over number 10 and his flat to asylum seekers because he's never there. Apparently his wife's rarely there. That's for sure. But anyway, he's going to have to answer questions. I'd be very surprised if it doesn't come up in some of the questioning, whether it's Kemi Badenoch's lead 6 questions or not. But what he says, there's going to be some very lawyerly speak in a way. He's going to try not, because if you lie to Parliament, you need to go. But it's going to be a complicated affair. Does it matter?
Oh, of course it matters. I think it matters in terms of the government being upfront in terms of the decisions that it's making. I think it matters in that whilst we obviously have to play the geopolitical cards that we are dealt, one can rage against the fact that China is a kind of emerging hegemon and challenge to the US, but you're still going to have to work out how you relate to it and in what form. But that doesn't mean that you should be giving it what it wants, even if that's at the cost of your own national security. I mean, this whole super embassy idea, just a stone's throw away from where we are currently, I mean, the various things that have always tumbled out in terms of how that decision was brought about, the fact that you had Angela Rayner when she was still in post effectively forcing this through, it's going to raise questions, to put it lightly, about whether or not we're just like bending over in pursuit of some crumbs of Chinese investment. We're just making ourselves...
And it is crumbs as well. Even when Keir Starmer did his trip to China, I mean, it was money down the back of the sofa levels of investment from the world's probably likely, at least first or second biggest booming economy as well. Absolutely fascinating. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because again, I don't know if this has caught the public imagination. This is like a Westminster bubble story, but it is significant. This does involve our national security, and the allegation that senior figures in this government used politics to basically derail a criminal trial as opposed to push for criminal trials of, you know, people who say the wrong things when there's been children murdered in Southport. I mean, this smells very, very, very bad in many different directions, and it is us who are weakened by it as a nation, as a country, and again, even more so than by what Keir Starmer did in the Middle East, recognising a Palestinian state without any demand. The hostages came home. Don't sodding well turn up in Egypt and go, oh, look at me, the big I am, I'm on the world stage, when you actually would have quite happily seen those hostages kept underground for months to come, as long as you got to virtue signal to your mates in the Labour Party and try to shore up your own position as leader. I mean, it's just shameful, isn't it? So much more to come. I'd love to hear your thoughts on everything we're talking about. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We'll get to your calls up next. Get in touch. This is Talk.
there was a real risk that what has happened, as I said, in around 50 Tory councils and 35, 40 Labour councils over the last decade would have happened in reform councils as well. So the problem at the moment for local councils is the vast majority of what they are delivering and their budget are social care. That is controlled by this Labour government and not by local councils. And so it is a great testament to them that they've managed to find the savings to plug the hole that this awful Labour government continue to leave in them.
Across across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:27 is the time. Let's get straight to what you have to say about all the big topics in the news. In particular, though, talking about Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, talking about how it may well be the case that some of these supposedly pro-Palestinian activists who've been on the streets, particularly since Donald Trump's peace deal, and no genocide. And there is a ceasefire. Maybe they don't actually want peace in the Middle East. Not quite her words, but do you think she's right? 0344 499 1000. Let's talk to Marilyn, who is in London. Hello, Marilyn.
Oh, hi, Julia.
Hello.
I just want to make a point. I'm 74. I've never been on marches until the hostage one, which I felt it was right to go on. I held a banner, which was what I meant, let the hostages go.
Yep.
They've now been released. I'm not going to go on another march for that.
Yes.
Let the Palestinian marches go ahead, but what banners are they going to be holding up? Stop the genocide? Stop the starvation? From the river to the sea. I mean, let Palestine be free. Let them go ahead, but let them show the banners and let them shout what they really want.
Yes.
That's all.
Yes.
And then we'll see them for what they really are.
I mean, they have been doing that. I mean, as Tom Slater was pointing out, they predictably walk along, and that, these marches, which are apparently all about peace, and these Gazan children they claim to case about, and then someone's got an Israeli flag with a swastika on it. What's that got to do with anything?
Absolutely nothing. So let them go ahead, and then now we can say you are not marching for peace. You are marching for you're anti-Semitic. Finished.
And then what should happen? Because I think a lot of us know that already. I think there are genuinely people who really, really, really do believe a lot of the Hamas propaganda, and frankly spend too much time listening to or watching the BBC, and they absolutely think the genocide's happening. But
a lot of them are very intelligent, educated people.
They're usually the worst.
I know, and they look at me as though I'm stupid when I say the obvious.
Well, say facts.
They've been taken in.
Yeah, they really can't believe that they have. I mean, they've been taken in on a lot of other big issues over the last few years, haven't they, as well? But it seems to be the same group of people every time, doesn't it? Marilyn, very wise words. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Matthew. He's in Bolton. What do you want to say, Matthew?
Yeah, hi Julia. You stole my thunder there, to be fair.
Oh, sorry. What did I do?
No, well, you keep dropping the truth bombs, and I think it is mass brainwashing. So credit to yourself and your other colleagues at Talk have been pushing back on this.
Well, I think credit actually more to members of the general public who stand up to it, because I think that takes quite something. Same with lockdown, same with all the trans madness, the climate change madness on this. But this stuff it's not even a matter of opinion. You just have to look at the facts. Anyone who is claiming there's famine or there's genocide in Gaza, I mean, simply not looking at the facts.
But the point is, you give people the platform from the public to speak up like we're doing now and to keep pushing back. I did see your appearance on Thursday at the commemorative event. I thought that was great.
Oh, that's very
I saw
kind.
your interview afterwards with Lewis. That was fantastic. So, Julia, that's the true spirit of British compassion and values, not this nonsense walking the streets of London.
Do you come across many people who will say, "Oh, Matthew, you're wrong. Why don't you care about people of Palestine?"
Well, that's the propaganda. If they ask me a proper question, I'll give them a proper answer, but I don't engage in the propaganda.
Because there is an element, isn't there, for me, especially some of the journalists who've been spouting a load of this nonsense and quoting, there was Radio 4, radio yesterday, the UN have, condemned Israel for genocide. I mean, you only have to read the report to know this is a load of abject nonsense, and the British government has quietly agreed that actually there isn't genocide and hasn't been genocide. And you only have to look, frankly, at the state of the people in all the footage coming out of Gaza. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those buildings have been flattened. But isn't it fascinating? Even Hamas only claim that 60-odd thousand people have been killed, bearing in mind that 25,000 of those are Hamas fighters. We know that. Wow, that's extraordinary. You can flatten pretty much an entire area and only kill 40,000 people. I mean, that tells you the facts. But when people who are journalists, especially war reporters, when they are claiming this, when they know so much better, I mean, they're not being honest actors, are they?
Well, my bigger issue, because it's what's happening on the ground, is the policing of these they're not protesters, but let's label them as protests for now, is the Met Police. The Met Police are far too passive. They're allowing death chants, they're allowing all sorts going on. We know it's happening, we've seen it for our own eyes, and they need to get their house in order. If these marches had been policed 2 years ago properly, like any other march, let's say football supporters, Gary Neville's favourite cohort, white British males.
Angry.
You could have guaranteed they'd have been stopped. Or they'd have been policed, more heavier policing.
Absolutely.
The passive policing and the politicians persistently making excuses in this country for wrongdoing and criminality.
Absolutely, and because they're afraid, because they want the votes, and this just simply cannot carry on. We see it. I mean, we see you, we see it. Matthew and Bolton, thank you so much. 11:33 is the time. Up next, the Sun's former political editor Trevor Kavanagh will be talking about Keir Starmer being humiliated on stage in Sharm el-Sheikh and what happens next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:36 is the time. Let's go to our next guest, Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor of The Sun. Very good morning to you, Trevor.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, lots going on at home and abroad. Let's get straight to it. In particular, just your reaction to the Trump peace plan, the Israeli hostages coming home, exchange with prisoners held in Israel, and Donald Trump basically hailing, this is the start of, peace in the Middle East. You've been following this stuff for a lot of years, and the West, Britain and other countries getting involved. How hopeful are you?
Well, about as hopeful as it's possible to be with a problem like the Middle East and the attempt by countries like Iran to wipe Israel off the face of the map. And I don't think that has gone away. It's just that they've had their noses rubbed in it a little, in some cases, in the case of Iran, quite violently, and so especially Hamas and Hezbollah, who are their catspaws. However, I do think that this is a chance because it's the rest of the Arab world that counts in this particular negotiation. And the Abraham Accords, for which Donald Trump got precious little credit in his first administration, have borne fruit. And all we need now is for Saudi Arabia to come publicly to the party. And we have a pretty well full house of Arab states who are sick to the back teeth of IS brutality and murder and slaughter and the resulting poverty that's inflicted on the Gaza and the Palestinian area. I think there is a reason for hope here. And I think that, I think that this will go down. It tastes bad in the mouths of those who detest Donald Trump. But this is a remarkable breakthrough that has to be given full credit to Donald Trump.
Well, indeed, I mean, the 20-point plan, a lot of it was, what was on the table under Biden. But again, these require a sort of force of character and energy to actually get through and banging of heads together. And I do think a lot of this comes down actually to what's changed since Israel did take out the nuclear threat was Iran, and also that attack on Qatar. Everyone says, oh, it was a mistake. No, it wasn't. It was a reality check for the Qataris and others that Israel's reach was further than they had feared. But one of the things I think is extraordinary is actually Donald Trump yesterday. Yeah, there was a lot of crowing. He was doing his victory lap. It may be a little bit too soon, but he got the hostages out. Full stop. He got the live hostages out, and that was the number one thing for Israel at this moment. But it's absolutely amazing. Flying over on Air Force One, attending, Knesset, going off to the peace summit and the signing in Egypt. He was on stage pretty much the entire time, speaking for a lot of hours. The energy levels, he's chatting to journalists on Air Force One on the way back to Washington. This is a man, in his early 80s, for goodness sake.
Well, it's amazing. And he is known, believe it or not, as a workaholic. He's up in very, very early in the morning and he works late at night, unlike Joe Biden, who had an afternoon nap and he was in bed by 9 o'clock. Yeah. That dynamism is bearing fruit in all sorts of ways. I mean, we're full of admiration, I think, or we should be, for what's happening in Gaza and Israel. But there is more to Donald Trump than just this. I mean, the economy in America is booming. We're all benefiting from that. So, will he end up on Mount Rushmore as one of the presidential greats? Well, I think that he's probably got people carving out his statue.
He probably has. And again, if this doesn't work out, the Nobel Peace Prize should be his. And again, if he was Obama, if he was Biden, he would have been a shoo-in and he'd have got it. Obama got nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize before the first 6 weeks of his presidency, when he'd achieved absolutely zero, and arguably with his failures on Syria, arguably caused more deaths as a result of US inaction than any government before him. Let's also talk about what happened with Keir Starmer in Egypt and Sharm el-Sheikh. On the stage, all these world leaders turning up. And let's play a little clip because it's joy to watch, where Donald Trump sort of ushers Keir Starmer forward on the stage. Enjoy, everyone.
United Kingdom. Where's United Kingdom? Where's our friend? Come here. Is everything going good?
Very good.
It's very nice that you're here. These people all came in like 20-minute notice. And I think it's fantastic. And we have so many others, and just so many others. And
you cannot help but smile every time you see that. I mean, our Prime Minister, he couldn't remember his name. Where's our friend? Couldn't remember his name. He's standing at the back, sort of, frankly, Trump had just been yapping on for quite a long time, as he did in the Israeli Knesset as well. And then he's called for it. He obviously thinks, oh, God, I'm going to be asked to say a few words. And then he's just left standing and Trump just carries on. I mean, ritual humiliation. And isn't it terrible that we're actually enjoying it as opposed to being outraged that our Prime Minister was humiliated in this way? But mainly because we know he despises all of us. He despises our country. So we don't care if he's humiliated.
Well, I think we despise him in return in bucket loads. And frankly, I don't think that was an accident by Donald Trump. He knew exactly where our Prime Minister was standing. He knew exactly what he was doing when he turned away from him, looking like a stray potato on a plate. I think that that was perfect. It was perfect time. My estimation of Donald Trump rose almost as much on that as it did on the release of the prisoners from Gaza.
He knew exactly what he was doing. I mean, some of the things that Donald Trump was saying, you know, I know everyone here, I love them all, but I don't love them all. There's ones I don't love. But, you know, you won't have, you know, I'll never tell you who the ones I don't like. Well, maybe you will find out. I mean, he was just riffing, having fun, enjoying his moment in the sun. But back home, there was also politics going on back here. And we had the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. She was giving a statement to the House about, well, basically the abject failures that we have seen to stop the terrorist who killed 2 at a synagogue in Manchester a couple of weeks ago. And she did talk about these so-called pro-Palestinian protesters. And she said, you know, some of them who've carried on protesting since peace in the Middle East, since the ceasefire deal, since the aid's gone in, there is no genocide, there's a ceasefire in place, the things they've been calling for. She says some of them don't want peace in the Middle East. Did you welcome those remarks?
Well, I think that you can't legislate against stupidity, can you? And I think that these marches, which have been an absolute abhorrence for the people of the capital city of London, every single Saturday almost throughout the last 2 years, should have been stopped at the outset. And they certainly should be stopped now that there's nothing left to protest over. As you said earlier, there's a whole shopping list of things that they want, but they've all been settled, at least for the moment. There is peace, there is a ceasefire, the prisoners have been released. Yeah. And so what are they protesting about?
Yeah, I mean, it's really that simple, isn't it? And what do you make of the, you know, we've got this sort of little Oxford University student, now identified as Samuel Williams, of the mean streets of Royal Tunbridge Wells, chanting Gaza, Gaza, make us proud, put the Zios in the ground. A clear call for Israelis, Jews, those like me who support the right of Israel. I am a proud Zionist to exist, to be killed. I mean, it's blatant. It's very, very blatant. What do you make of this going on our streets and the police just standing by, listening and watching and doing nothing?
Well, what the opposite of that is the fact that he's basically calling for the support for Hamas. This is what the ultimate result of what that protester is calling for is a triumph for Hamas in the slaughter of innocent Israelis. And it's almost impossible to imagine what is going through the minds of these people as they ignore or completely resolutely refuse to examine the evidence of what happened on October the 7th 2 years ago. Yeah. I mean, it was appalling. It makes your eyes water just reading it. And they've totally ignored that and are blaming the Israelis for defending themselves.
Yeah. And they're still claiming that, you know, women weren't raped, weren't mutilated. I mean, it is just extraordinary the lies people will tell themselves, and every single one of them should be forced to sit down and watch the full unedited evidence of what actually happened. And by the way, we know it happened because it was filmed by Hamas and live streamed on Telegram and other social media formats. I mean, there is no doubt about this. It's extraordinary. Let's also talk about something I've got no doubt of, that we're not going to be able to actually reform the European Convention on Human Rights. British ministers say they've won the backing of more than a dozen countries, including, you know, big players like Germany, to reform the European Convention on Human Rights, ECHR, basically looking for ways to curb illegal migration. More than 16 countries support our moves to change the way the courts interpret the convention, because, of course, it's being used again and again, ridiculous interpretations of the articles, particularly to privacy and right to family life, to basically prevent them being deported. Do you have any hope whatsoever that these changes will take place, given the activist judges who are involved in these cases?
It ain't going to happen. And if it does, why should we applaud these countries for coming so belatedly to the conclusion that this is a deliberately corrupt system? And in any case, here in Britain, we could very easily remove those judges who are giving away the freedom to stay in this country to people who blatantly do not deserve it. And on any pretext whatsoever, they simply make something up about whether or not their kids like chicken nuggets or something equally.
I know, we keep using that example because it is so absurd.
It is. And also the Albanian crime gangster who had a cannabis factory owner who has not been sent back to Albania because his daughter would not have a male role model. I mean, what sort of role model is that?
It is utterly ridiculous, isn't it? Well, look, these days illegal migrants, and Boris Johnson has been giving his tuppence worth again. I mean, sorry, does this man want to come back, or is it just me? But he's basically saying that it was Rishi Sunak's fault for not putting the Rwanda policy into place, and that's why we've had this wave of illegal migrants. Don't blame him. He's also basically said, oh, we didn't expect so many people to come in the Boris wave. Those are the legal migrants, and one of the years under which he had responsibility for the visas that have been given out under his watch, where we had 1.2 million people arrive, some 900,000 net arrivals to this country under that wave, people who are here right now. And he's saying nothing to do with me, Gov. I mean, it's laughable, isn't it?
Well, I think that Boris Johnson is congenitally incapable of admitting that he's wrong, even when he's caught red-handed with his hands in the safe. I mean, look, you've got to remember that it was Boris Johnson who was arguing for an
amnesty.
Truce, an amnesty for those who'd already arrived, which would have meant not only that tens or hundreds of thousands who are here illegally would remain, but it would act as an even bigger magnet to all those who thought that the moment they set foot on these shores, they would simply remain. I mean, no, Boris is guilty as charged.
Absolutely. Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor of The Sun, thank you so much for joining us. Always great to get your very clear and concise analysis of these things. Tom Slater is also here, editor of Spiked Online. Just on Boris Johnson and the ECHR, illegal, that's illegal and legal migration. But again, Boris Johnson, I didn't do any. I mean, Boris has never done anything. Again, I always say to him, in these situations, I'm not your mistress, I'm not your wife, I'm not fooling for this nonsense. No, he gets away. I remember said to him once, you get away with lying to your wives, you don't get away to lying to voters, mate. It doesn't work. But it's just rubbish, isn't it?
No, and I think on the one hand, it's an inability of his to admit that he's done anything wrong. I mean, that's just a kind of psychological issue that he has. But his party is certainly on a very different stretch now. It's fascinating that all of the announcements that have been made over recent months are basically the Tory party committing itself to cleaning up the mess that it made over the course of the past 14 years. And to be frank, Boris Johnson is a huge part of that mess.
After promising the exact opposite. That's the key, isn't it? 11:49 is the time. Up next, do you smack your kids? Have you ever smacked your kids? A little slap on the bottom, tap on the hand? Well, quite a lot of people want to make that illegal, including the NSPCC. They're being backed by Alan Shearer and Sir Michael Caine, who said you shouldn't be allowed to hit your children, which you are still allowed to do in England, but not in Wales and Scotland. We'll talk about that up next.
United Kingdom. Where's United Kingdom?
Behind
Where's
you.
Where?
Oh, I'm here. Oh, there you are.
Very good.
Oh, stick kids coming forward.
People all came in like 20-minute notice.
Oh, he's come up to speak and Trump sent him away.
Others, and just so many others. And it's such a compliment to what we're doing.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:53 is the time. Tom Slater's still with me, editor of Spiked Online. Get his thoughts on what my next guest had to say. Dr. Ashley Frowley, who's a sociologist, talking about, well, a call for a ban on smacking. Who's saying this? Well, it's the NSPCC, the children's charity, backed by big names like the Alan Shearer, Sir Michael Caine, and others, celebrities who've signed a letter handed into Downing Street yesterday. Dr. Ashley Frowley, they're saying that parents should not be allowed to smack their children, or even just a little slap, little tap. It's illegal in many other countries, legal in Scotland and Wales, but not in England, where it's protected under the Children Act. But should parents be allowed to hit their kids?
Yes, I think the vast majority of parents who do practice this use a light smack on the back of the legs or the back of the hand for the purposes of discipline. And they know the difference between beating a child and a light smack for the purposes of discipline. I think it's really disingenuous to portray this as like a clarification of the law. It absolutely isn't. The law recognizes that some parents do use that form of parenting, whatever you might think of it, and that is not assault. And they want to remove that so that a light smack becomes assault. And that is really, really serious. Even if you are accused of assaulting your child, the investigation breaks up the family. It is extremely serious. And they've often said explicitly it's to send a message. You want to send a message, talk, clarify the law. You don't send a message by sending police around to someone's house to arrest parents for a parenting style that you don't like.
Well, indeed. Look, I've never hit my child, but I had one daughter, you know, two parents, one daughter. We were very clear and firm. I'm kind of the view that if you end up needing to slap your child with its hand or the bottom, you know, you may have lost a certain amount of authority and discipline in what's going on. That said, I've got a lot of friends, lovely, good people, good, loving parents with lovely kids. And the kids, particularly boys, actually, you know, they found that the only thing that did work was that little physical slap. And they've done everything, they've tried everything, and that's what they've done. The idea that those parents would be criminalised is obviously ridiculous. And one of the issues with the children's charity, the NSPCC, is they are dealing with the horrors of children who are genuinely abused by parents who beat them, who torture them, parents who neglect on a horrible basis, who allow the most awful things to happen to their children from other people or do it themselves. I mean, and then they're trying to say that a parent who slaps their kid on the bottom when they've repeatedly refused to listen is in some way equivalent to those evil parents, and they're not.
Yeah, and it actually makes it a lot more difficult to deal with those serious situations because finding serious child abuse is like finding a needle in a haystack. And what you're proposing to do is just add a ton more needles, essentially. So you're not actually protecting children. And in fact, when, you know, even if you disagree with this, you know, I've got two small children, well, they're 7 and 9 now, but, you know, it's not a parenting style that I used. But I do recognize that there are a lot of loving parents who wish to do this, and they're not criminals in any way.
They haven't got to. I mean, sometimes people say, well, actually, you know, it's parents, you're because you're angry or you're exasperated. But I'm like, well, yeah, that's real life, isn't it? That is real life. Sometimes you are pushed to a limit.
It's true. Sometimes that a parent might be pushed to a limit, but it is also true that some parents do consciously use smacking as a backup method. And, you know, and they are using it very consciously, and it clears the air. They give the child a hug afterward. And there are studies that show in families that have a lot of affection that physical discipline is actually produces very strong results with children with clear boundaries that know that they're loved. So the situation is actually very, very complicated. And to say that this is simply assault causes way more problems than it actually solves.
That these celebs and other people, I'm sure they're well-meaning, but this idea that, but children, you know, if you went up and smacked someone in the street, that would be assault and a criminal action. But if you smack your child, it's not, and how wrong that is. But that's completely ignoring you know, the rights of the child, the rights of the parent, and the role that the parent has to discipline and educate a child. Again, I think that if you are smacking your kid repeatedly, and I think you maybe need some better techniques for parenting, and I think we should be helping parents not to do that. But it's the idea that, you know, criminalising loving parents who are trying to do their best, often in difficult circumstances, with a child who's acting up. I would be worried for the child if you want to know what the full background is, but they're not bad people, and they're not committing a crime.
I mean, arresting people because there are probably better ways to parent is not something I think we should be doing as a rational society.
Well, in that case, we'd have to arrest all those liberal parents who let their kids run around restaurants, wouldn't we?
Well, this is another issue.
Supermarket. Now, there's plenty of those kids you could happily slap.
Yeah, I mean, we've problematized discipline. Like, there's actually a bigger picture here about like where this is coming from. There's this sort of trendy positive parenting where like any kind of discipline and negative feelings in the child is really frowned upon.
Yeah.
But you, as a parent, you have a special relationship with that child. You're not responsible for the socialization of an adult on the street. You expect that adult has already been socialized. You have a special relationship with this child.
Exactly.
You are responsible for this child's upbringing, and you cannot do that unless you give the child firm boundaries. And unfortunately, as a parent, you must make a child feel bad sometimes. We don't like doing it, but we have to do it, and it's an important part of setting a boundary.
What you did was wrong, and you will be punished for it. Whether it's, I mean, I know a lot of kids who'd say they would rather they were, got a slap than sent to their room for 2 hours. Dr. Ashley Frowley is a sociologist. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining us. Hope you'll join us again. Tom Slater, where are you standing on this?
Well, I think Ashley talks a hell of a lot of sense there, which is that this is clearly not child abuse. This is clearly not assaulting a child. It's something that everyone in their own lives has either experienced it themselves.
Did you get hit as a kid?
The odd light smack, absolutely.
Did you deserve it?
And I almost certainly deserved it. So I'm a product, I hope, of the fact that this doesn't necessarily have to scar you for life.
He's a lovely good boy now, Mrs. Slater.
I'm just about on the straight and narrow. And I'm not saying it's entirely down to the violence rained down upon me as a child. But who knows? It was probably instructive. We all know that this is not the same as child abuse.
And that's the thing.
And you shouldn't be criminalising parents for things that are perfectly
This is the thing.
fine.
These things always go over the top. Why do you deal with the kids who are being beaten in their own homes rather than dealing with parents trying to do the right thing? It's madness, isn't it? So much more to come. Do stay tuned. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. It's 2 minutes past 12. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you so much for joining me. Lots and lots to talk about. We are going to be talking more about the hostage release yesterday, what hopes for the Middle East peace process. Also, the 16 countries we were discussing with Trevor Kavanagh a few moments ago, who are understood to be supporting Britain's moves to change the way the courts interpret the European Convention on Human Rights, because they're making mad, ridiculous, politically motivated interpretations. Boris Johnson defending his record on immigration, distancing himself from the legal Boris wave of migrants, even though he's caught absolutely bang to rights. And the Liberal Democrat Council blaming Storm Amy for his decision to remove St George's and Union flags from the lamppost. Oh, come on, give it a break. Breaking news for you in the last minute, though. Nigel Farage, who was the victim of threats to kill the former UK leader in a TikTok post last year by a small boat migrant. He was an Afghan migrant, Fayaz Khan. You remember that story. Nigel Farage is at Southwark Crown Court right now, and he was there when Fayaz Khan was sentenced to 5 years behind bars for those threats to kill the Reform UK leader. We are expecting a statement from Nigel Farage in response to that. The Afghan migrant in October last year posted a TikTok video in which he said he was, quote, going to shoot the Reform UK leader when he reached Britain in a small boat. After arriving, he was then charged with that threat to kill him. He was, he said, pop, pop, pop. He goes, Englishman Nigel, don't talk S about me. You don't know me. I come to England because I want to marry with your sister. You do not know me. Don't talk about me more. Delete the video. I'm coming to England. I'm going to pop, 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 making gun gestures with his hand. And then he pointed to an AK-47 tattoo on his face. Tells you everything, doesn't it, really? To emphasise that he, quote, wasn't joking. A clear threat to kill, arrives in this country, arrested. Tom Slater, he's editor of Spiked Online, joining me. Wasn't expected to be telling this story just right now, but I mean, caught bang to rights, prosecuted. I'm surprised he was even prosecuted, frankly, given how hopeless and inadequate our authorities are. And now, well, found guilty, we know already, and now sentenced to 5 years behind bars. He won't serve 5 years, of course, no one does, but that is a good result, isn't it?
It is a good result. We can only hope that the other outcome of this, if the system is sorted out in time, is that this will be the last thing. This will be the last thing he does in this country, because this is.
He'll leave prison and he'll be deported. Will he?
Well,
will he, Tom?
At least we've got a few years to try and get the justice system into a sane place where that sort of thing is concerned. Who knows? Maybe that might even happen under Labour. Stranger things have happened, but this is a reminder, isn't it? Because I don't know about you, Julia, but until I read about this case, I was under the impression that all these people were just fleeing war, that there was no bad apples amongst any of them, that it was actually kind of mean-spirited and rude and unfeeling to suggest that if you've got an open border, that anyone could use it to walk in, even people who might actually want to do ill to other people, even people who might be fleeing charges, whether that's murder charges, rape charges, or even terror charges in other countries. This has entirely exploded my worldview, and it's taken me a few minutes to absorb
I'm going to let you. We're going to get the smelling salts for you, and I mean, you could have those also for the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, saying that some of the pro-Palestinian activists on our streets, the ones who've continued to protest since Donald Trump's peace deal, since we've had a ceasefire in Gaza, established beyond any doubt there hasn't been a genocide, that maybe they do not want peace in the Middle East. I know. Look, we're going to get the smelling salts for Nigel. Maybe you need them too, because it's all a bit of a shock to us, but there we are. You carry on. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all the big stories today. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. I'm going to try and say this while I'm trying not to sneeze. You can text us and talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate message. Particularly like to hear your reaction to that sentencing of the man who threatened Nigel Farage, jailed for 5 years. I mean, anyone, he's got an AK-47 tattoo on his cheek. I mean, he looks lovely. He looks lovely. I'm sure he would have been a fine, upstanding member of the community if he was able to stay on the streets. And in no way would we be worried about our teenage daughters walking past the asylum hotel that we were paying for if he'd been kept free. I mean, absolutely not. I mean, he looks like a lovely guy. You'd employ him in any job. Absolutely. I mean, to be fair, he's probably an engineer or an astrophysicist or a brain surgeon. They usually are. Shall we carry on? Anyway, let's go to our next guest and let's talk about, well, the extraordinary day yesterday when we had not just 20 of the last remaining alive hostages released. We've now also seen, well, just 4, and only 2 have been confirmed and named so far of the 28 remaining dead hostages. But we had extraordinary scenes in the Israeli parliament, in the Knesset. 14 standing ovations for Donald Trump yesterday before he headed over to Egypt, to Sharm el-Sheikh, to sign the official peace deal. But what hopes do we have for the future? Well, let's talk about someone who was in the parliament yesterday. She was going to be on the show yesterday, and of course wanted to see what Donald Trump had to say. Dr. Einat Wilf, she's a former member of the Knesset. She's also a former intelligence officer in the IDF. A very good afternoon to you, Einat.
Good afternoon.
I mean, it was an extraordinary day yesterday. I cannot stop watching the videos of these hostages being reunited with their families. It was wonderful to see, even though they're incredibly thin, have gone through incredible ordeals. Some, you know, tortured, beaten, starved, kept below ground for 2 years. Some kept on their own throughout that time. Extraordinary, horrible existence they've had. But the joy on the streets, not just in Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, but everywhere in Israel, was there to behold. How long do you think that joy is going to last?
Well, certainly it was a remarkable day, getting all the remaining living hostages, getting them all at once without grotesque ceremonies, being released into their long-suffering and loving families was really something remarkable. But you're right. At the end of the day, none of us ever live on a constant high. And Israelis understand that much of the hard work begins now. And it's hard also because it's very gray. It requires a lot of focus on details, whether it's to ensure that the ceasefire holds, whether, as you mentioned, Hamas has already reneged on the promise to release all the deceased hostages, to release their bodies so that their families can have some closure. That has not happened. Nothing can proceed without this happening. So now it requires, when much of the attention and also actually detention is gone, so they need to focus to ensure that Hamas abides by its promises, releases the remains of the deceased hostages. And ultimately, despite all the beautiful, it was really beautiful and uplifting talk of peace in the Middle East. Peace in the Middle East will be built with a lot of gray drudgery of day by day, ensuring that ultimately the ideology that I've come to call Palestinianism, this singular obsession with the non-existence of a Jewish state, is ultimately gone as a dominant ideology of the people of Gaza and the West Bank, that people really appreciate. I know it's rough to say, but that the people of Gaza and the West Bank appreciate that they have been defeated once more in their goal of trying to annihilate Israel, that they would all be better off moving to a world where they try to build for themselves rather than destroy what Israel.
But that would be a sort of a rational assessment of what would be good. And again, the people who march on the streets of Britain streets and the campuses of universities and in America and elsewhere, who claim to be on the side of the Palestinian people and innocent men, women and children in Gaza, never seem to have called for the destruction of Hamas. They've always seemed to think that Hamas somehow is good for the Palestinian people, when of course Hamas have made it blatantly clear in open statements they are not just quite happy for innocent civilians and children in particular to die. They actively want it. It is part of their propaganda tool, fighting against Israel. But here's the thing. We've got a peace deal. 20-point plan. I mean, Hamas has not signed up to most of those points. They've just agreed that a ceasefire, Israel withdrawing to a certain point, 20 live hostages come out, and then nothing else has happened further since, and they haven't actually done it. Now, I'm so sorry, Einat, I'm going to have to interrupt. Please do stay on the line. We've just got a development here. Nigel Farage, Reform UK leader, has just walked outside Southwark Crown Court and is about to speak. We'll go live to him now.
But the fact is that in 18 months' time, this violent criminal, somebody with 17 convictions in Sweden. In 18 months' time, he will be in this country, living in a house of multiple occupancy or a hotel. He'll be free to walk the streets whilst his asylum claim is being judged. And the only reason we know about this guy is because somebody sent it to me on TikTok. And it makes me wonder, how many other Madder passers are there now in this country, or will there be as the boats continue to cross the channel? So I'm pleased with the judgment, but deeply, deeply concerned that this guy will be out free in 18 months. A strange twist at the end, when he was after the sentence, and he was speaking from the dock, trying to be heard, making it perfectly clear that he'd rather go back to Afghanistan. Now, in Germany, there are plane loads of people going back to Afghanistan. I wonder if in 18 months' time, the only thing that stops him being on our streets is we have some kind of deal with Afghanistan. I doubt it, but at least it's a possibility, and the Germans have shown us what they can do. So I've got mixed feelings. It was right to bring this case. I'm happy with the sentence. I'm happy with the win. But I repeat, in 18 months' time, this violent criminal will be free on our streets. Thank you.
Right, well, that was Nigel Farage speaking outside Southern Crown Court about, this man sentenced to 5 years for threats to kill him. He's an Afghan migrant, already a criminal in Sweden, 17 convictions, will be free on the streets within 18 months because the mad sentencing we have in this country, and he's going to be free on the streets, paid for in an asylum hotel or an apartment, and will be here, goodness knows, until we can deport him to Afghanistan. I'd love to hear your response to that. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let me go back to my guest, Dr. Enid Wilf, very kindly waiting. Apologies for that, but obviously rather big news here. Dr. Enid Wilf, we were just talking about Hamas, and we've got a 20-point plan, and actually Israel has agreed, Benjamin Netanyahu has agreed on behalf of Israel with Donald Trump to the full 20-point plan. Hamas have not. They've not signed up to anything past today, really. We've already seen Israel has shot some Palestinian activists who have been crossing the line into past the point they're allowed to cross into IDF-held territory. We've got Hamas making it clear that they have no intention of laying down their arms, and we've seen mass executions of other organisations, clans or militia they consider to be a threat on Gaza's streets. So what hope do you have that this is going to lead to any peace at all?
So peace with the Palestinians, with the people in Gaza and the West Bank, the only obstacle to that has ever been their singular, over a century-long obsession that it is more important for them that the Jews have nothing, no state, no sovereignty, than for themselves to build one more Arab state. So that ideology has to go before we can speak of peace. Now, the Trump plan speaks of coexistence, of de-radicalization, of Gaza not being a threat, of deep reforms in the Palestinian Authority. But all these words really have to come down to very clearly Palestinians ending their century-long war against Jewish self-determination, most manifested in their insistence that they are fifth-generation Palestine refugees, despite being in Palestine, and demanding to settle in Israel in the name of something they don't have, but which they call a right of return. Where I do see opportunities, and the American president addressed it yesterday in the Israeli parliament, is with other countries. It's very clear that the American president wants to move forward to expand the Abraham Accords, which he views as his, I think correctly, crowning diplomatic achievement of its previous term. He wants more of those. He said it very clearly yesterday that he wants them quickly, and he wants the countries not to place many obstacles. So he's intent on that. I think in order to achieve that, he needs the Palestinians to at least not be in the headlines. Yeah. So even if Hamas basically did not say yes to his plan, a kind of situation where Israel and the Palestinians argue about this disarmament and this line is already multiple levels under the normal global attention. And I think this is the American president's plan. Try to get the Palestinian issue bogged down in endless details and negotiations while there is progress with other Arab and Muslim nations.
Yeah, I mean, that has always been the key, hasn't it? It's because actually many of the populations of a lot of other Arab nations are very pro-Palestinian, and a lot of the Arab leaders have to pay lip service to this issue while actually privately behind the scenes just wanting it all to go away. It's certainly no longer a useful tool for them to bash the West over the head. What did you make of, I mean, the significance of Donald Trump in getting this deal sort of over the line? Because a lot of the 20-point plan, you know, it was there under Biden. But what did you make also of other world leaders, in inverted commas, like our own Prime Minister Keir Starmer, humiliated on stage by much to the amusement of most of the British people, I have to say, by Donald Trump yesterday, and the role that they claim they've played in this peace process?
So I would say, I mean, and it's very obvious, the only person who was able to put it together is the American president. He has a remarkable way of knowing where to put the pressure. He actually understood that this would be better served by supporting Israel, supporting its war, pressuring, for example, Qatar, that has been a nefarious actor, and making it clear to them, Qatar for many years basically ensured that the hostages stayed with Hamas as long as Hamas could use them to stay in power. So the American president was able to put pressure on Qatar and also give them a lot of carrots in order for them to essentially kind of let go of their somewhat support for Hamas so that the hostages can be released. It was an important inversion where much of the world helped Hamas believe that holding the hostages was an asset. I think President Trump helped make it clear that holding the hostages was a liability and that they therefore need to hand them over. Also, he's very good at creating a kind of global peer pressure situation. You saw, like you said, suddenly all these world leaders scrambled to join and to claim ownership and to say that they had anything to do with it. If anything, they undermined the possibility of reaching something like that for a very long time. But he's able to create this peer pressure, and suddenly all those countries are signing on to this 20-point plan that requires a change of an ideology, requires Gaza not to be a threat, requires Gaza to be disarmed, and have all these. I mean, everyone talks about the end, that this is a path to a Palestinian state. They just somehow forget all the things that need to be done on the path.
Well, indeed. Now, there's no doubt at all, anyone who's really paying attention, Israel has won yet another war started by a hostile neighbour and has won that war, but has lost, well, won the military war, certainly lost the propaganda war. Israel increasingly isolated on the world stage. What do you make as a proud Israeli about the way that Israel has been treated, not just by idiot students at universities, but by established war reporters on the BBC, by members of parliament in the UK, presidents of France and prime minister of this country being sort of castigated, accused completely falsely, with no evidence whatsoever of any use of genocide, of famine, of war crimes against the people of Palestine, when the facts are very, very clear. It's not propaganda. The facts are very, very clear that none of those things are true. What do you, as an Israeli, make of that and the isolationism and the unique criticism of Israel?
To be that it's unfair would be putting it mildly. It's to live in an upside down world where things actually don't make sense anymore, except that they only make sense in the very sinister sense. And what really happened yesterday, another important aspect of the American president did, and he actually said it in his speech, is that he wanted to stop the anti-Israel momentum. He understood that it was getting to be very dangerous. I think he understood that it was so removed from reality that something very sinister was building. It was, I describe it as the belief that a better world, salvation, a human rights world awaits on the other side of ridding the world of the collective Jew, a very ancient and dangerous idea. And he said that he needed to stop that momentum. And what he did with the plan and getting all the countries to sign yesterday is to basically kind of push back and begin to change that momentum. Yeah. It also explains why so many people are disappointed with the ceasefire. Yes. All the people in the streets, because obviously they didn't want a ceasefire. They didn't want the fighting to stop. What they wanted, and many of them actually say it, they were beginning to actually even smell it, that sense that Israel is isolated, Israel is weakened, the world is turning on Israel. They could literally feel and smell utopia. Utopia in their world is a world without the collective Jew, without Israel. They began to feel that they are birthing that utopia thanks to the actions of Hamas. And suddenly, the American president, with his peace plan, with the 20 points, with the release of the living hostages, has ended that momentum. That's very clear. Long before there's peace, he killed that momentum. And they're not happy about that, because what they wanted was that momentum for a world without Israel.
Yeah, absolutely. At least we're hearing the quiet bit out loud now. Always good to speak to you. And again, I think yesterday was an amazing, amazing day, and watching those videos of your fellow countrymen, returning home to the bosom of their families, to their girlfriends, their wives, their children, their mothers, their fathers, their brothers, their sisters, their friends, was extraordinary to see. And I'm just absolutely thrilled for your country that you've got your people home. Dr. Einat Will, former member of the Israeli Parliament, also former intelligence officer in the IDF. Tom Slater, I had the privilege of meeting Einat when I was in Israel. I mean, she's an impressive woman. She's hardcore. You'd want her on your side in a fight. That's all I'm saying. But it is extraordinary, isn't it? How things have turned around, and the West reaction to the attack by Hamas, and the West reaction to even this peace deal. No,
absolutely. I think the peace deal has called the bluff of the pro-Palestine lots who've been running around for 2 years saying that all they want is a ceasefire and peace. They're presented.
That's all we care about, the Gaza babies.
Absolutely. They're presented with a ceasefire and peace, and they say not this ceasefire, not this peace. They seem to have more stomach for the fight to carry on than actually Hamas themselves, who at the very least have agreed to this tentative first step in the ceasefire deal.
Do you think they think that those keffiyehs they wear are like bulletproof or something? No, but that's the thing. Do they think that? Because they're the big I am once they've got their keffiyehs.
No, exactly. I mean, they must think something like that. It's also a good example of, this is not a new story with this particular conflict, but the way in which Western leftists treat foreign wars as just a kind of playground for their own political battles, regardless of the consequences for what's actually happening.
The reality on the ground for people.
Exactly. It doesn't important because it doesn't touch their lives. I think this is a reminder that these are people who, when October the 7th happened, they put in for a national demonstration whilst the fighting was still going on. Before there was any retaliation.
Not fighting, while women were still being raped. Children were being burnt alive in their homes.
This is before there was any retaliation from the IDF. To be perfectly frank, this is before the IDF even managed to get their arse together to go to the kibbutzim and to the places and where this had actually taken place. I mean, it was... These are people who thought the legitimate response of the Israeli government to October the 7th would be to say, you know what, Hamas, you've got a point, and dissolve the Israeli state. There is no reasoning with these people. There is no moral high ground that they should be given. They've shown that with holding demonstrations on the day of the Heaton Park synagogue attack. They've shown that when they held demonstrations on the anniversary of October the 7th. And they've shown that when they're continuing to hold demonstrations, even when they've got the ceasefire and the peace that they claim to be agitating.
And here's the key thing. You can absolutely see the joy and the relief in Israel getting their hostages back, but also the war, the ceasefire. They don't want their sons and daughters to be fighting in Gaza. They want them to stay alive. They don't want them to be injured. They don't want to be fighting. They don't want this war. And on the other side, you've got people who just basically like, I'm going to send my kid to martyr themselves because if they can kill some Jews, it's worth it. These two are not the same, everybody. They are not the same. These people have been radicalised. It's not just Hamas. And if you really cared about the people of Gaza, you would want Hamas gone. And if you ain't calling for that in your protests, then you're on the side of Hamas. It really is that simple. 12:26 is the time. Going to get Tom's reaction to the statement from Nigel Farage, the former UK leader, standing outside Southwark Crown Court just a few moments ago, where the small boat migrant, he's an asylum seeker, of course he is, from Afghanistan, Fayez Khan, was threatened to 5 years behind bars. Of course, he'll only serve, as Nigel Farage points, 18 months behind bars. Then he will be walking the streets in an asylum hotel or in a house of multiple occupancy, walking the streets, even though he's been convicted of this crime, before we can deport him, if ever, to Afghanistan. He's got a point, hasn't he? We'll talk about that up next, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Give us a call now, 0344 499 1000. That's 0344 499 1000 to have your say. Give us a call now, just that breaking news. We'll get you on air. This is Talk.
These things only work if you really, really mean it. And that means going all out. That means tying it to your ability to do pretty much anything. And that isn't actually our culture in the UK.
We don't want that. We don't want that.
I'm desperate for anything that will help tackle our illegal immigration crisis.
United Kingdom.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. I'll get to your calls in just a moment. I just want to update you on that sentencing of the man who had made threats to kill Nigel Farage. He was an Afghan migrant, actually live streamed on TikTok his entire journey across Europe. He spent quite a long time in Sweden, where, turns out, he had 17 convictions, including for carrying a knife and threatening behaviour. Changed his name ever so slightly to get here. And on a boat, he'd seen a video, it transpires, of which Nigel Farage had himself done, where he had so basically, uploaded a YouTube titled "The Journey of an Illegal Migrant," and he basically he highlighted some of these TikTok videos from this Afghan migrant, Fayaz Khan. This man did a response video in which he basically threatened to shoot Nigel Farage. Given that this young man has a tattoo across his cheek of an AK-47 and was going pop, pop. I mean, not unreasonable to believe these were genuine threats to kill. Well, Nigel Farage's response to the 5-year sentence which was given to this man, who, interestingly, the jury took almost 12 hours to find him guilty. I mean, the whole thing's on video, guys. I mean, were they serving good sandwiches in court? What the hell took you that long? But Nigel Farage said that he's deeply, deeply troubled by this man being here. 18 months' time, he says, he's going to be out on the streets. He'll be in an asylum hotel or a house of multiple occupancy, because 5-year sentence means only 18 months because we have a joke of a criminal justice system, but he'll be free on our streets. And pointing out that, you know, the Germans have been able to deport to Afghanistan. Currently, we pretty much can't deport to Afghanistan. So, you know, he's going to be on our streets free until, well, forever, for all we know. Tom Slater, I mean, thank God this man got convicted, or even charged, got convicted. And that he's been sentenced to a decent time behind bars, but the fact that he won't serve more than 18 months for threats to kill a prominent politician in this country, very undermining of our democracy. But Farage is right, he's going to be out on the streets in 18 months.
No, exactly. That's why I think the temptation to say justice has been done or the system works doesn't cut it. He shouldn't have been here in the first place. I mean, that's the thing that we need to bear in mind. The fact that I remember this story when there had already been word had got out that this kind of TikToking, you know, gun brandishing, machine gun tattoo on his face, illegal migrant was making his way to the UK. This was something that showed up what it's soft touch doesn't do it justice, just how reckless our essentially open border policy had become where illegal migration is concerned. The fact that Farage calls it out is then issued with these death threats by the man himself as a consequence. The fact that he issued them, I mean, there's no accounting for stupidity amongst some of these people.
I mean, he does have an AK-47 rifle tattooed on his face.
Exactly.
That's fairly stupid.
That was never going to help him in the, you know, various brain surgeon job interviews he would have had lined up when he finally got here. But nevertheless, it was that there's no accounting for stupidity. But at the same time, I think maybe is reflected with the fact that people know that you can take the mick where the UK is concerned and where illegal migration is concerned. They're obviously not to this extent, but nevertheless, a lot of people are on a daily basis. And I think what this case has done is that it's beyond Nigel Farage being issued with these blood-curdling threats. It's proved the point that he and many people, whether they're protesting outside of hotels or outside of HMOs or raising the issue of illegal migration, have been making for some time, which is that if you allow for just a complete free-for-all when it comes to people crossing into your territory, yes, not everyone who's on one of those boats are going to mean ill to everyone here, but of course there's going to be a not insubstantial number of them.
The crime rate of the crime rate is off the scale of these young men. What a surprise, they're already committing a crime being here. And the fact that this man already had 17 convictions in Sweden, including for carrying a knife. I mean, seriously, what on earth are we thinking? We're going to talk to the Sun's reporter, Thomas Godfrey, a regular here on the show, big friend of the show. He's outside Southwark Crown Court. We're going to talk to him in just a couple of moments. Going to take a quick break. Probably also going to get to Michael in Hertfordshire as well. Lots more top guests to come as well. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is sort of the home of common sense. I've got lots to squeeze in this section, but let's get straight to Thomas Godfrey. He's a news reporter at The Sun live from outside Southwark Crown Court, where we have just seen the sentencing of the man who made threats to kill Nigel Farage, and Nigel Farage has spoken outside as well. Thomas Godfrey, thank you for joining us. What's been going on?
Well, it's been a dramatic morning here at Southwark Crown Court in South London. A 5-year jail term for Fayaz Khan, who made serious and well-planned, the court found, threats from France to kill a sitting member of parliament and the leader of one of the biggest political parties in the country. Now, there was a couple of striking moments this morning in courtroom 4 here. One was when Fayaz Khan, for the first time in this entire proceedings, having maintained his innocence throughout, finally apologised to Nigel Farage through his barrister. Maybe a sort of last-minute 11th-hour bid to knock a few months off the sentence. And the second striking moment was after being given a 5-year jail term, which is a significant sentence for any offence, began immediately shouting and screaming and turning at Nigel Farage and levelling a barrage of insults, most of which I can't repeat on the radio. And that just showed maybe how that apology, maybe not as genuine as it
No, you're kidding. I'm so surprised it wasn't genuine. Also, apparently, you want to be Prime Minister. I'm not here because I want to kill you. It's basically accusing Nigel Farage of using this as a political point-scoring exercise. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it? But Nigel Farage made some, really telling words, I think, outside the court, and he's faced, as you'll know, he has faced death threats for years. He's had 24-hour security for years. Often has had to, have well-meaning donors paying for it because the state refused to provide it before he was an MP. It is extraordinary, what he's had to deal with. But pointing out that this man is going to be free on the streets, not in 5 years' time, in 18 months' time.
Yeah, and Mrs. Justice Stein, the High Court judge who was drafted in to preside over this case, given its seriousness, made reference to the murders of Joe Cox and Sir David Amess in her sentencing remarks, and pointed out that if MPs cannot be freely available to their constituents and other members of the public, then, well, what's the point in a democracy? Those things are critical to having a parliamentary system. And Nigel Farage has made that point outside today. It could be as little as 18 months or 40% of the 5-year sentence, maybe slightly more than 18 months, but he will be on the street. And then, because he's from Afghanistan, Britain does not have a returns agreement with Afghanistan, despite what Fayaz Khan said in court this morning, that he wants to go back there. And that means that he very may well end up in some form of asylum housing. Now, we have heard he is in the middle of an asylum application in this country. His claim in Sweden was wholly rejected, especially after committing 17 offences there, including for knife possession. And actually, when he came to the UK, he was on the run for a 6-month sentence in Sweden for possession of a bladed article. Sweden, for what it's worth, have withdrawn their extradition request for this man. They don't actually want to deal with him. They're happy to leave him to us in the UK. And so actually now the telling factor here will be whether this man's asylum claim is approved, because based on the fact he's committed 2 criminal offences in the UK already, threats to kill and the second offence of attempting to enter the UK without valid entry clearance, which he was also sentenced for this morning, then he is, by definition, a foreign criminal. The sentence he's been given would activate the provisions which normally see people automatically deported.
Yeah, but it won't happen. You know that, I know that, and he probably knows that too. Thomas Godfrey, thank you so much. Sun's news reporter there. Appreciate that. Well, let's get to my next guest, actually, and this is rather perfect timing, really. Tom Jones, not that one. He's a senior fellow at the Centre for Migration Control and joins us to talk about, claims that this government is going to be able to reform the European Convention on Human Rights, along with 16 other countries across Europe, of course, which is preventing the deportation of people just like this man, because we don't, they're able to use the European Convention to stay here. Good afternoon to you, Tom.
Afternoon, Julia. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. I mean, just your reaction to what was said in court, what Nigel Farage has had to say in this whole case, because this is a classic example, isn't it? We've got a bloke here, he came here illegally, he was on the run from Sweden where he's had all these convictions. They don't want him, we don't want him, we're going to pay for him to go behind bars, then he's going to be out, we're going to be paying for him in an asylum hotel. What are the chances of us ever getting rid of him?
Very low, probably, to be quite honest with you. I think everybody knows the absolutely disgusting state of the asylum system, why we have a system in which this person's asylum request can even be considered.
Exactly.
Is frankly beyond me, and it's beyond most of the British people, really, too.
And that's the thing, it does get considered, and we know that there are activist lawyers and now very much activist judges who, in their interpretation of the ECHR, will actually give succour to these people. And this is the crucial thing that the government is saying. They've got 16 countries, we understand Germany among them. Germany's got pretty sane on a lot of this stuff only in recent years under its current Chancellor, that they would back a change in interpretation of some of the articles in the ECHR. But this has always been the issue, isn't it? There's nothing wrong with the rights that are there, you know, the right to family life and things like that. But judges have been completely ignoring other key parts of those rights, which is also the rights of the people of the country that people have arrived in.
Yeah, absolutely. So these latest proposals would significantly reduce the court's power to prevent asylum seekers from being deported, which obviously currently can take months, even years. And the hope is that eventually that will lead to a situation in which asylum seekers are stopped from using the ECHR to avoid deportation, even when they've committed a crime, as they currently do. Probably reform of the ECHR is Labour's preferred strategy. It's very complex with leaving the Good Friday Agreement, but long term it will retain the problem, as you mentioned, of activist judges and the replacement legislation that will come in, as we saw with Brexit, with the new system that came in after Brexit. Actually, it could lead to an even worse situation.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so madness, isn't it? Well, that's talking about sort of deporting illegal migrants or people who've overstayed visas as well. Boris Johnson has been defending his record on both illegal and legal migration, in particular the so-called Boris wave of migrants, the huge number of people who came over as a result of visas handed out under his premiership. He's distanced himself, saying sort of basically nothing to do with me, Gov. Tell us what actually happened and tell us, is he to blame or not?
Well, of course he's to blame, but Boris Johnson is and always has been a pathological liar. So net migration added about 2.6 million people to Britain's population.
That's just under as a result of Boris's decisions as Premier.
Yeah, and the Australian-style point system that he introduced. Now, he has put that down to needing large numbers of people to help fill workforce shortages during and after COVID, which would be a great argument if he didn't design the system long before COVID. He then went on to try and blame Rishi Sunak, who, it should be pointed out, is the only Conservative Prime Minister in my lifetime who has ever actually lowered migration. And all he did was undo Boris Johnson's immigration changes. I think one of the interesting things is that people now vastly overestimate the rate of legal migration in this country. I think largely because the quality of migration that arrived under the Boris wave is so low that most reasonable people think a reasonable government couldn't allow people to be here legally.
No, exactly. They just assume, well, of course these people couldn't have been given visas. We're told it's about skilled workers, vital workers for vital industries or for carers and the like. Again, one of the reasons we need a load of carers was because we sacked about 45,000 of them for not having a COVID jab, even though they'd worked the whole way through that lockdown period. I mean, but this thing, but Boris Johnson saying, well, it's nothing to do with me. I took back control of our borders. But that was the whole shtick, the Brexit campaign, take back control. He promised you, let's get Brexit done. We'll have control. We'll have an Australian-style point system. Well, the Australians, they've got a much bigger country. They do actually need more people. We're a small island. We don't, thank you very much. But B, they do actually, they're very, very picky about who they take. I mean, they are absolutely demanding that people have the particular skills and particular industries that they need. We're talking about letting in people to run kebab shops, for goodness sake.
I think ballet dancers were on the shortage application
I mean,
at one point as well.
Can't get enough ballet dancers and mime artists, for goodness sake. Thing is, we laugh about it, and whenever I actually write about this, I find myself thinking, I don't know whether to laugh or cry, because that's what happened. And this was the man, this is why I've just got no time for Boris Johnson. He was the one who was, the great white hope, promising that he was going to be the guy who got it. He absolutely didn't. We're the ones who got shafted on that front. Tom Jones, Senior Fellow at the Centre for Migration Control, thank you very much for that. Tom Slater, I mean, Boris Johnson's ability to deceive other people and himself knows no bounds. But his sort of claim like, oh, the rise in illegal migration. And we did see, it happened over a number of years, and it was people moving from lorries, moving to boats. It became more visible. But the legal migration was totally within our control. We were no longer going to have people just arriving as they chose from the EU, but we were going to control the number of people coming in. And what most people meant by that was, we're going to limit the number of people coming in. He put immigration on steroids.
And that was always his position. He's always been a liberal on migration. The thing that he needed to understand is that that's not where the country was. I mean, if you look at polls and the sort of level of net migration that people are comfortable with, the vast majority of the population want it, less than 100,000, which it hasn't been since 1997.
I think they want early tens of thousands, if that.
It's one of those things where there is the democratic deficit, to use that bloodless phrase on this issue, is so enormous, and it's a particular problem for the Tories, because at least with Labour they're kind of pretending now that they want to get a grip on migration, but no one believes them. The Tory party basically committed a form of political fraud over 14 years. Tens of thousands, you end up with hundreds of thousands. Tens of thousands, you end up with hundreds of thousands. Will take back control, they relinquish control, and Boris Johnson has to take his.
And then hundreds of thousands turned into, again, the total number of people. I mean, 2.6 million people. That's 4% of our population. I mean, it's absolutely, I mean, it's absurd. It is off the scale. No other country can survive that. Again, that's why the vast majority of people now support, limiting immigration, and a majority now are in favour of deportations. Sorry, we're done. Thank you. The door is closed. We've got enough people. And I'm sorry, they can keep shouting racist and bigot at people for that as long as they want. People aren't going to change their minds because they've woken up and they've seen what's going on and they've seen how they've been lied to. And as I keep saying to Boris Johnson, we're not your wives. We're not going to fall for your lies anymore. Sorry, mate. 12:48 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking about the local council who've removed St George's flags, but blaming it on a storm. No, maybe you just don't like your country. That's up next. This is Talk.
There was a real risk that what has happened, as I said, in around 50 Tory councils and 35, 40 Labour councils over the last decade would have happened in reform councils as well. So the problem at the moment for local councils is the vast majority of what they are delivering and their budget are social care. That is controlled by this Labour government and not by local councils. And so it is a great testament to them that they've managed to find the savings to plug the hole that this awful Labour government continue to leave in them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
When is a flag not a flag, and when is a flag up a lamppost and considered to be a risk to the public as opposed to a wonderful sign of patriotism? Well, it depends if there's been Storm Amy in recent days or not, because according to the Liberal Democrat-run Shropshire Council, many of the beautiful St George's and Union flags that had been hung from lampposts got a bit damaged and became unsightly, torn and potentially hazardous, and so of course had to be taken down by the council. Or frankly, well, people who don't like our flag. Well, let's talk about this with Andrew Allison. He's head of campaigns at Popular Conservatism and joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Andrew.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thanks so much for joining us. It's fascinating, isn't it? Lots of people have been putting up the St George's and Union flags as part of Operation Raise the Colours over the last couple of months. And bosses at Shropshire Council said these flags that had been put up, well, they needed to be removed because they got a bit damaged by the storm. I mean, gosh, that's an incredibly strong storm, isn't it? Able to damage those flags, and had to take them down. And the question is, was that really the reason the Lib Dem Council took down the flags of our great nation state?
I'm shocked, Julia, utterly shocked that this Liberal Democrat Council would want to remove flags. But so many councils, and I noticed that they either seem to be Labour or Lib Dem for some reason, seem to cite health and safety reasons, because that's the catch-all for all of it, isn't it? And now, of course, it's unsightly, and now because it's because of a storm. But I was driving a couple of weeks ago. It might have been during that Storm Amy, for all I know. But I was driving recently along this road, and there were St George's flags and Union Jacks on the lampposts, every single lamppost. Yeah. This was going on for about a mile. All of them were secure, and by God, were they getting blown about in the wind. All of them staying on the lamppost, and they looked magnificent. Yeah.
I mean, also, that's the funny thing. You think about these flags, you think we have flags outside all the time. They have flags on boats that go across the high seas. They somehow seem to survive. It's almost like they're made to withstand the weather. But look, this is reality. We know that there is now a battle over our flags in this station. And quite absurdly so, because we are the only country in the world that is embarrassed about our flag. But a lot of these same councils, we saw this in Birmingham, where this kind of started, was, well, happy to have the Palestinian flag flying everywhere, put up by the council, and people going, we ain't in Palestine, mate. Doesn't actually exist, by the way. We're going to put up our own flags because we should have our own flags. And then Birmingham City Council taking them down. A lot of these same people, these Lib Dems, I mean, happy to wave an EU flag any day of the week, at the proms, you name it, wherever it is, they'll wave their EU flags. But they feel very embarrassed by their own flag.
Well, because I'm a political geek, Julia, I was looking at some footage from the Liberal Democrat conference from a few weeks ago. And of course, all of a sudden, all of the delegates at the Lib Dem conference were waving flags around. Now, I'm sure that wasn't staged in any way. I'm sure that was a spontaneous act of patriotism from all those Liberal Democrats, although it has to be said that some of them did look remarkably uncomfortable and didn't really know what to do when it comes to waving a flag. So it's very convenient for them to show that to the nation, but we know that that's not really what they believe. And you mentioned Birmingham. I mean, they were raising the Pakistan flag for Pakistan's National Day, and they were celebrating that. I think the Pakistan flag was projected on the side of the library. At the same time, they were ordering people to remove English flags and Union Jacks. So I think it's pretty clear what they're up to, isn't it?
It really is quite extraordinary, isn't it? Now, I know you're at Popular Conservatism, but I just want to ask you about a Reform UK councillor as well, Claire Mackey-Brown. She was reported to Police Scotland about an interview she did on STV last week over an alleged hate crime, where she was talking about how she says about the protests that we've been seeing about a migrant hotel, saying there is true unrest and it's scary. It's scary as a local resident, somebody who was born and bred here. Immediately went, oh, I shouldn't have said that, and then being sort of told off by the interviewer, and then facing an allegation of a hate crime for talking about being born and bred somewhere. What do you make of that?
It's utterly disgraceful, isn't it? I mean, I was born and bred in Bishop Auckland in County Durham, and I use that phrase quite liberally when anyone asks me where I come from. I could say I was born and bred in England. I was born and bred in the UK. It's just a fact of life. Now, you could be of Pakistani descent, but your parents moved here, and you were born and bred in the UK. It's just a common phrase. And the fact that police time is being wasted on this, that's the thing. There are so many other crimes that need investigating, and yet the police are wasting valuable resources on investigating something that will ultimately go nowhere.
Yeah, well, they've already said there was no crime, but they should have known that immediately and told the person who made the complaint they were wasting police time. Andrew Allison, thank you for joining us, Head of Campaigns at Public Conservatism. Really appreciate that. Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, still with me. We talk about these stories because we need to, because they're absurd. But I do feel we're wasting our time and the audience's time, and indeed police time, that those things even get talked about. But also this council just sort of coming up with the spurious excuse about why they've taken down those flags. I'm sure that an EU flag would have survived.
No, absolutely, it would have survived the storm, miraculously. But it's embarrassing, isn't it? They know they're on the back foot, and in a way that's good. They know that it's absurd and controversial to treat the Cross of St George or the Union flag as something that needs to be taken down at a moment's notice, lest it, rip asunder community cohesion. So they have to make stuff up. In a way, that's progress, because previously they might have just ripped it down anyway. But yes, it's embarrassing for them, and we all know that they're lying. So it's one of those things where we all know what the truth is.
And these people, they're horrified. A phrase I can't use, but a flag lover, shall we say, that they call everybody. Mike Graham, I don't even know the word, because he got called something else on social media. I was laughing about half an hour about it, as I told him. But flag lover, let's go with lover. Anyone who's the Union flag or the England flag, but they absolutely love that blue flag with the yellow stars on. Oh my goodness, and they love that Palestinian flag. It's quite bizarre, isn't it? Here's another flag lover. Ian Collins, he's here to join us.
Got to put him up properly, though. I'm not into blue-tacked flags on any old lamppost. Just did that outside my house.
And the right way up.
I'll take your flipping teeth out. You don't, frankly, you don't insult my flag by just lobbing it anywhere. It's got to be symmetrical, it's got to be ironed, it's got to look good, it's got to be level, a certain height.
Question, do you know which way up the Union flag goes?
I know, yeah. The narrow bit goes on the bottom, right?
Okay. Just checking.
You've got to know this kind of malarkey. If you don't know malarkey, you're nothing. Nothing.
Sorry, I think I'm in the episode of EastEnders all of a sudden.
I'm sorry. Well, I was initially annoyed about the woman who got investigated after the.
And now I'm annoyed
to be fair to the police, they didn't really investigate her, did they?
No.
Some idiot just went to the police because they'd seen all the.
But they don't immediately